The people smash the smash.
And he hasn't smashed anything. I mean, he's literally, all he does is he smashes records every sort of couple of weeks, when more and more people come in a period of 24 hours.
Smash the gangs that are running this vile trade.
You're never going to smash the gangs. That's something that basically is impossible. The gangs are like the Hydra. You cut the head off and another two grow.
So I did write to ministers and say that I wasn't convinced that smashing the gangs was the right sort of way of thinking about things.
We will smash the gangs that undermine our security.
Keir Starmer has just tweeted 15 minutes ago. He says, "I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source." Maybe I'll just read it all in his accent, shall I?
There is no return to freedom of movement. We have left the EU. I do not accept that prevents us working with other police units here, with prosecutors here, to smash the gangs.
Well, I'm sure the smuggling gangs are absolutely quaking in their boots now. Keir Starmer is on their case. Solving this issue, smashing the gangs, is that the impossible dream, Tom?
It really seems beyond him at the minute, I have to say.
We're going to get the evil people smugglers and we're going to smash them and we're going to put them in jail. That will solve the migrant crisis. Prime Minister Keir Starmer's promise to smash the gangs has resulted in just 5 convictions. Hurrah for operating small boats.
So what he really wants to say is that this policy of smashing the gangs is a total and utter disaster. There isn't a cat in hell's chance that it's going to work. You just can't say it.
It's crap. That's what he's basically saying.
I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. Mark my words, I will take back control of our borders. That means cutting migration, ending the use of asylum hotels and ramping up our efforts to stop small boat crossings.
It's like a parallel universe, the real world, as told by the impressive David Bolt, and Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves' fantasy world.
We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to me. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's absolutely fantastic to be back in the, quite literally, hot seat. I know the bank holds over, but I don't think the aircon's working today, that's for sure. But we've been lucky to have that all over the last few weeks, have we not? Anyway, I hope you had a great bank holiday. If you are back at work, yeah, I know. But if you are still on your holes, maybe with the kids, I hope you're still enjoying things. And it's great to have you join us today. Whether you are listening on DAB Plus Radio, whether you're on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, thank you, as I say, for coming here. Don't forget also, if you want to catch up on anything you may have missed, you can go to my YouTube page. We cunningly called it The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. If you hit subscribe, then you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, yeah, of course, you guessed it, Nigel Farage is accusing Keir Starmer of siding with international courts against the British people as he sets out his plans in just half an hour's time for the mass deportations of illegal migrants. Some say this is a controversial policy. I'm not entirely sure that booting people out of the country who don't have a right to be here is remotely controversial to the vast majority of sane people in this country. But there we are. Well, the Reform leader has asked whether the PM wanted to protect Britain's borders and citizens or remain wedded to outdated international treaties and judges' ruling. I think we all know the answer to that one. Meanwhile, Labour are being keen to push that more than 100 asylum seekers have been detained for deportation to France under the one-in, one-out policy. I don't know if one of them is in Angela Rayner's holiday home in Brighton, nice and close to the coast, empty for most of the week while she's at work. Seems like an obvious place to put them, but that's just my suggestion. But there has been a fresh surge, what a surprise, in crossings. And of course, we've seen a backlash over the last few days from senior members and grandees of the Labour Party who've accused the Prime Minister of failing to get a grip on the issue. Meanwhile, we are going to talk about Israel as well. Benjamin Netanyahu has described an airstrike on a hospital in Gaza which killed 20 people, including 5 journalists, as a tragic mishap. The Israeli PM expressed regret over the deadly strike on the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis on Monday. And there is an IDF inquiry into the strike and why that happened. We're going to be talking all about that. We're also going to be talking about Notting Hill Carnival and why, and as you've just been hearing actually from Fiona McInerney, female students at top universities around the country are still going to be forced, despite that very clear, very unequivocal, very legally enforcing Supreme Court decision that we're going to be going to be forced to share toilets with men. You can call them biological males if you want, whether they're identifying as trans or not. They are men. If it's a single sex, women's toilet, women's changing room, it should be just for women. So why is it that universities and apparently also HM Treasury doesn't seem to understand the law? We'll be talking about all of that. And I say, well, I'm sure we'll touch on Angela Rayner's new home purchase as well. All of that is going to be talked about with my guest joining me today, Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Great to have your company today as well. I have to say, I missed some stonkingly good news stories and very lively news stories last week. More of these protests. I'm digging out my England flag. Again, if you're offended by the England flag, think you're probably living in the wrong country, and I include a lot of homegrown Brits in that, by the way, but also Lucy Connolly's release as well, and that sort of comes up in terms of freedom of speech. And I know Spiked Online and also Free Speech Union, of which you're also a member, same as me, have been very vehement about the right to say things, frankly, which other people don't like. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, especially in relation to the Donald Trump executive order signed yesterday, basically to criminalise with a year in prison someone burning or desecrating the US flag, something I'm pretty sure you and I would both think was an outrageous attack on freedom of speech. But we've got to start with Nigel Farage. In about 24 minutes' time, he's going to be standing on stage in Oxfordshire in front of the British media, who's not on holiday. And he's going to basically announce, we've seen, I think the Times newspaper had the exclusive at the weekend, his big plan to tackle illegal migration. And I'm just going to outline it and get your thoughts on it. So, detaining immediately, full stop, detaining and deporting all illegal boat arrivals. A new law basically to make it clear that, at no point if you arrive illegally are you ever going to be allowed to claim asylum. No bail, no right of appeal, off the streets. A statutory duty on the Home Secretary to deport anyone illegal. Detainees being housed on either military bases that are now disused or building new prefab detention centres. Voluntary deportations being offered, a nice little app. You can leave, we'll give you $2,500, flee fly, off you go, ta-ra, or you will be forced to leave. Doesn't matter if you're from Afghanistan, Iran, Eritrea, wherever you're from, you are going to be out of this country. And as Nigel Farage said, it's what happens to you when you go back? Not our problem. If you can't deport there, Rwanda still an option, Albania an option, even the Ascension Islands in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Also, talking about 5 charter flights a day. Airlines won't carry them, fine. RAF planes will do it. £10 billion cost for all of that, but he reckons it will save money in the long run. Labour and Tories have already criticised a lot of these figures. Crucial to this also, scrapping the Human Rights Act, leaving the European Court of Human Rights Convention, derogating the Refugee Convention, but also a new British Bill of Rights, basically enshrining our right as to do anything that's not prohibited by law, including freedom of speech. What do you make of that package of measures?
Well, I think he's really thrown down the gauntlet, hasn't he? Immigration is the key issue of British politics right now. You see that if you look at the opinion polls, you see that just in the general kind of atmosphere around politics at the moment, and Farage is continuing to set the weather. If even a few years ago you would have suggested that these kinds of policies would have been firmly on the table and all the other parties would be scrambling to respond, you probably wouldn't have been believed. But I think probably the most important part there is the willingness to leave the European Court of Human Rights, to repeal the Human Rights Act, to suspend various other international conventions that we are party to. Because really at the core of this is control. Can a British Home Office pull a lever and something actually happen, or does it get gunged up in the
you
court?
And your crazy talk. This is post-bank holiday madness.
And that's why I think that's really at the core of these proposals. And I think it's fascinating that in terms of the criticisms, particularly from the Labour Party, but even just the sort of liberal left media in general, is this plan isn't fully costed. It's not...
Neither is the plan to have the entire world, third world young men turn up on our shores and live for free in hotels. I'm not sure that's been costed either.
But they're kind of getting him on the spreadsheet questions rather than the kind of principle. And even
they
if
never get it right.
And even if Labour or those newspapers vehemently disagree with what it is that Farage is proposing, I think they've realised that the public are in a very different place. They want this issue to be dealt with. The old virtue signalling doesn't work. At least
they don't want this issue to be dealt with. What they want to do is like the issue to get migrants out of hotels. Put them in houses of multiple occupancy, because then they're sort of dissipated around the community. There's not one big hotel.
No, the public want it dealt with. The politicians now have realised that. That's probably about as far as it goes.
Yeah, but the politicians don't want to actually deal with it because they don't want to grip hold of it at all, do they? But it's interesting you say it's the number one concern. There was the usual sort of, bleeding heart human rights refugee representative on the Radio 4's Today programme this morning, and was saying, look, this is kind of stirred up by... some of the argument was this is stirred up by the media, and actually people's concerns is the future of their children and their cost of living. And you think, but this is tied into it. When we are spending billions on dealing with this issue, when in terms of our quality of life is massively impacted by crime and by fear of sexual assault for our young women and our girls, and when we talk about the changing culture of our country, that's mass legal as well as illegal immigration. I mean, one thing he was right about was that actually a lot of people have got a completely... They think there are far more illegal migrants than there are actually legal migrants. People tend not to get the figures. They don't really understand actually. But the legal migration is off the scale as well, and people are concerned about that. But why anybody would think it was controversial to detain and remove people who have no right to be in this country... just absolutely flabbergasts me. I mean, there's not a bit of this policy that I don't go, yeah. And you know as well as I do, and audience knows, well, I've not agreed with the policy that Nigel Farage has announced with us on human rights, whether it's about, women being housed with male prisoners. And I call them out, I do it publicly, I do it to their face every single time. There is not a single word of this that I have seen so far that I could disagree with. And frankly, if it cost 20 billion, it's still worth doing. Criminal justice, protecting our borders costs money. I think people would rather that it costs more. I don't think it will. They would rather it cost more if it could protect our borders. But at the end of the day, this is similar to the Australian policy that did work, not the Rwanda policy that was that wouldn't have worked because it was on a scale of, it was just a tiny couple of hundred people. It's got to be very, very simple. You come to this country, you are never going to be walking the streets. You're never going to go and get your little black market job. You're never going to be free. You're not going to be able to bring your family here. You're not going to be able to stay here. You're going to be shipped out. You don't want to go back to your home country? Fine. Then you're going to be in Rwanda or Albania or the Ascension Islands or anywhere else. I mean, not our problem. And when Nigel Farage was asked, what about people who, could face torture or reprisals in their home countries? And he said, well, I think it's where the British people are now. I think the rest of the world's problems are not our problem. We need to be concerned about people in our country. But again, you can easily solve that by saying, right, we'll take you somewhere else, to a third country. But you ain't staying here. I think within a week, that message would get across. And within a week, those boats would stop. There would be no market to come to this country anymore. Full stop.
And that's something that you've certainly seen in America, where you have, first of all, a set of policies introduced, but also just the message really being clearly sent out that asylum, but really just asylum as a cover for illegal migration, will just not be tolerated. And that definitely has an effect. I also think from, talking about the kind of pro-refugee usual suspects who have been out on the airwaves this morning, I really think they have to wake up and smell the coffee. People's attitudes are really hardening, and this is not because they're terrible people, it's because of the fact that they've seen that their country is being exploited, that you've got a lot of people staring into the middle distance and talking about our responsibilities under refugee conventions and so on, when we all know that this has just become, in no small part, the degree to which we can argue about, a channel for illegal migration, and quite a dangerous one, insofar as if you don't know who these people are, predominantly men as we know, then you don't know how many of them... Not all
women and children. That's what the Treasury told us.
You don't know how many of them might be fleeing charges in other countries, how many of them might be a threat to the public. So the public have woken up to that. If we want to carve out an immigration policy and an asylum policy, which is, yes, humane, but also sane, you need to get a grip on the border. Otherwise, you will never have any public buy-in.
Well, you're not a country without a grip on the border.
You're not. It's essentially not enforcing your own laws as well. It becomes incredibly corrosive. And I think if we need the fact that all of Europe is looking at this issue afresh. Left-wing governments, right-wing governments, centrist governments, they've all realised.
The German Chancellor is getting very hardline on this stuff because he knows it's him or the AfD. I mean, I don't know why Keir Starmer doesn't get this, because he fundamentally doesn't think there's anything wrong with people coming into this country illegally. He really, really doesn't think that's a problem. He's playing along with it. I get that a lot of my voters might think that, but he doesn't really think it.
And I think some of the smarter politicians as well have realised that not only do they have to do this because it's being demanded of them democratically, but also that what we've ended up with, the status quo, is morally reprehensible. It seems to fail everyone from top to bottom. It's incentivising people to pay people smuggling gangs insane amounts of money. It's leading people to...
No, it's come down in price and markets worked wonderfully. It's only 1,500 quid to get across now. It used to be $5,000. It's amazing. Free market capitalism is an amazing thing.
When you allow those forces to be unleashed. But yes, it's one of those things where it's quite clear that we've created a system in which if someone is willing to risk their lives crossing the Mediterranean and the English Channel, lining the pockets of some of the worst people imaginable in the process to end up with their chance to languish in a hotel and make a meagre wage, doing Deliveroo illegally. Does anyone think this is a wonderful, positive success story?
But for those people from their basket case countries, this is a good thing. And a lot of these young men, by the way, are fleeing conscription in their countries, often in civil wars. And I'm really sorry you were born in a basket case country. Well, but again, I'm with Nigel Farage. I'm just not sure it's my problem.
But also I'm talking about even in terms of this country. Like we talk about there are certain situations where immigration can be a real boon in terms of certain industries that need to be built up, so on and so forth. There's all kinds of success stories you could point to. From our country's perspective, this is not one of them. I think that it should be obvious to anyone at this point.
Absolutely. Well, I want to hear from you, unsurprisingly. I do want to know what you think. Maybe we're going to get more detail. There are going to be lots of questions from the sort of the hand-wringing media today about this controversial policy of booting illegal people out of the country. I mean, mind-blowing. Particularly also replacing the Human Rights Act with the British Bill of Rights. Are you worried about the cost? Because that's what the papers are. The Tories and the Labour, they're worried about the cost. Yeah, because the cost is the issue, really, as if the cost of what we're dealing with now isn't the real issue. Give us a call. I'd love to hear your thoughts about Nigel Farage's plan for the detention and mass deportation of illegal migrants, replacing the Human Rights Act with the British Bill of Rights, all of that. Love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate. Message. Really can't wait to get your calls on air. We didn't touch very much on there, but the scrapping of the Human Rights Act, which has been outrageously, people say it's different interpretations. It's been misinterpreted. I always say there are two paragraphs to Article 8, the right to family life and to privacy. They ignore the second paragraph. Leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, just look, if that's what's going to stop us from deporting people, then so be it. Derogating from the Refugee Convention, again, from a very different time, the 1950s, I think, just from a very different time when we're talking about a small number of people. We're now looking at millions of people. It no longer works. But crucially, replacing all of this with the British Bill of Rights, and in particular we think a sort of a First Amendment style right to the absolute right to the freedom of speech, similar to America, where unless there is clear evidence of a direct and deliberate attempt to incite specific acts of violence against someone or something, you have the right to say what you want. I mean, that surely is something we should be fighting for.
No, absolutely, because we've just completely warped our own tradition of freedom of speech in this country. We've kind of replaced the liberties that we used to have with these kind of European style rights, which are heavily caveated, which are ultimately adjudicated by a foreign court, which are completely outside of our own kind of specific tradition of liberty, of toleration, of live and let live. So actually the kind of starting of a conversation towards restoring a lot of the approach that we used to have in this country would be very welcome. I think we're seeing with a lot of the speech policing cases, which are generating a lot of interest in the US, Lucy Connolly, etc.
Yeah.
I think the more kind of Anglophile Americans, I should say, have noted that we've really drifted quite far apart from the kind of tradition we gave them, if that makes sense. So I think not only this question about migration lends itself ultimately to the question about what do rights mean in this country, because as we all know, they've become a kind of perversion of what they should have been in the first place.
I mean that's the thing. I mean we've had that awful scenes of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance criticising our record on freedom of speech in recent years, We had the release of Lucy Connolly from prison, of course, last week. I don't think she should be the poster child, though. I've got to be honest with you. I love my dear friend Alison Pearson, her interview with Lucy Connolly after release. She should never have gone to prison. I don't think she should have been convicted of a crime. But I don't think she's the poster child for where we want to go. But then I suppose, defending people's right to post horrible things is kind of the essence of freedom of speech, isn't it?
No, exactly. I think there's a distinction between saying that she should never have been in prison, that it was absolutely abhorrent that not only was she to be convicted, but to given such a hefty sentence. I mean, all of this...
More than some people who actually committed arrests. I mean, at the time, I supported her being in prison because I believed the reports with the police had actually... The police, I mean, she's one of sort of apology effectively from the police in terms of they completely distorted what she said to them in her interviews.
Yeah, and they later had to correct their own press release about what it is that she'd allegedly said to them.
I made a judgment on her based on what I knew, which was what was publicly put out. I didn't know that some of that was lies, and I was wrong.
But as you say, you don't have to like the individual in question, support the individual in question, agree with the individual in question to defend their rights. And I think that's also...
And especially after Vicky Jones, the Labour councillor, who, around the same time is on camera. It's not like, didn't he say it? On camera in front of a large group of people, calling on people to slit the throats of, the fascists, the far right. I mean, literally, and using the finger. Now, a jury chose to get him off for that. Now, Lucy Connolly should have gone to a jury. She should absolutely have pleaded. We understand why she didn't, because she thinks she'd be waiting a year, 2 years. It wouldn't have been 2 years, but it could have waited a year for a trial. And she wanted to get back to her child and thought she'd serve less. I think that's what a lot of people would do. But she, it is fascinating that a jury would let him off when, I mean, he was, in my view, feel free to sue, Ricky, he was clearly inciting violence. A large group of people very, right in front of him, and calling people to slit people's throats. I just don't think people should go around saying stuff like that. I don't consider that to be protected speech.
Well, I think even where incitement is concerned, this isn't necessarily the law in this country, but I think what the standard should be is a more kind of US style, which is that you really tightly define it to speech which is likely and intended to cause the violence. That
I thought that was likely and intended.
Because I think
it wasn't a figure of speech.
Well, because there's also the question where incitement is concerned, and this bears to the Lucy Connolly case as well, although that was on social media rather than in person, is sometimes people just come out and say things that they instantly regret. And I think I could easily see a situation in which both that tweet and that speech fell into that category.
Well, she'd already deleted her tweet long before the police got involved.
And incidentally, Ricky Jones, apparently, when he put out the video of his speech on social media later, he made a point of removing that section. Whether that's back covering or whether that's actual regret, we don't know. But I think people can just have an outburst. That's not to justify it. That's not to say...
I think you can have an outburst, but I think afterwards to say, look, I said something, I shouldn't have said it, and I'm wrong to have said it, and I apologise for that. Yeah, I'm not a fan of just let's just gratuitously punish people for people saying the wrong thing. But but I find it extraordinary that the jury made that decision. But I think it's very interesting that it does tell us quite a big message about actually the British people when asked to judge on these things pretty much think that people should be allowed to say what they want to say. Just one final thing, talking of crimes, whether it's a crime or not. Latest figures. Well, these are figures from 8 p.m. last night. I find it hard to believe there have not been arrests since then, but 423 people arrested at the Notting Hill Carnival, according to the Metropolitan Police. 2 stabbings. So, well, no one's died. Well done, everybody. Now, look, about 1 million people attend this carnival. We had 2 people die last year, more stabbings. And people are saying, look, actually, this is less serious violence, largely peaceful. Of course it's largely peaceful. It is. I've been to Notting Hill Carnival, many years ago, when I was younger. But if you look at, say, like Glastonbury Festival, 5 days, lots of people go for 6 or 7, 210,000 people attending. There were 31 arrests. No one stabbed. 31 arrests over all that time. And you think, it's older people. It's not in such a built-up area. It's ticketed. But I don't know of any other event where this is considered to be a good news story, that there were only 2 stabbings and only 423 arrests, which is how it's being played. I don't think that's a good news story.
Well, cool. And the fact that you have kind of repeated stabbings, acts of violence at any particular event, obviously that should be called into question. I suppose the question is there something about the way in which the event is held now, because of the fact that or continues to be held rather, because of the fact that it's so open, because of the fact that it's in a built-up area, that this therefore makes it, given the scale of it, impossible to police effectively? Or is it the fact, and I suspect this is the case at least to a certain degree, is that the police are wary of policing it to the extent that might actually make people more safe because of the fact there is a kind of cultural sensitivity there or not wanting to be seen?
I haven't seen any videos of dancing coppers this year, so that's at least something. They're actually doing their job.
But that's the question that needs to be answered.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, I want it to carry on by all means. But I tell you what, though, I love all the people who actually love the fact you've got the Jamaican flag being flown. I mean, it's lovely. Although we drove past yesterday on the way back from the airport, massive load of Palestinian flags on one building. I thought, is it a Palestinian festival? I thought it wasn't. Celebration of Caribbean culture. But, you know, the same people who go, oh, look at that. They love a Palestinian flag. They love a Jamaican flag. Someone putting up an England flag. Beyond the pale. Why on earth are people putting flags up? By the way, these people have the Ukraine flag, a trans flag, an NHS thing, and an EU flag in their ex-bio every single time. The two, not just two-tier justice, the two-tier hypocritical nonsense we get spouted from these people is amazing. But anyway, I want to hear from you on any and every topic we're talking about, but in particular, of course, I want to talk about Nigel Farage. In a few minutes' time, he's going to be on stage in Oxfordshire. He's going to be announcing reforms plans for the detention and mass deportation of illegal migrants, and also replacing the Human Rights Act with a British Bill of Rights. What do you make of that? Do you support it? And what do you make of the Labour criticism of the cost? Oh, it's going to cost more than 10 billion quid. Do you really care about that? I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. This is Talk.
Immigration has always been one of the sort of big three subjects where you compare it to the cost of living crisis and the NHS, but it just seems to be ratcheting up even higher. Now, it's all very well and good having smaller policies and saying there's no silver bullet. It's going to take a whole plethora of policies to actually get on top of dealing with illegal migration.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:28 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater's also here, and you are on the phones. 0344 499 1000. What do you make of what Nigel Farage is going to announce? We've already got quite a lot of an outline. He did an interview the newspapers at the weekend about what he wants to do to tackle the illegal migrant crisis. And yes, BBC, it is a crisis. And no, it's not being stirred up by the media. This is a bottom-up story, I can assure you of that. Let's go straight to your text messages before we get to the phone calls. Jonah says, thank goodness a man in a party with the courage to do what's right and to see it through. Michael says, reforms proposals are vital. I'd go further, review all the leave to remain issued since 1997. I'm with you, Michael. Genuinely. I don't think that's on top priority right now, but I'm with you. Neil says, this better be what the people are asking for. He needs a strong anti-immigration stance now if he wants to be Prime Minister. Lee says, a brilliant idea. Could be Lee Anderson, this, to be fair. I hope it works because there are monsters on the streets of the UK. Daniel says, I don't know if it will work. Never had a chance to prove it, but anything is better than the useless lot we have now who refuse to do anything and treat illegals better than their own citizens. Declan says, if Farage ever gets near the levers of power, he'll turn the UK into Poundland Trump's America. I hate to tell you, Declan, I think a lot of people would be quite happy for that. Let's go to the phones. Richard is on the line. He's from Middlesex. Good morning to you, Richard.
Hi, Julia.
Hello, what do you want to say?
Basically, what it is, Julia, people power. If England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales all come out on strike, close offices down, everywhere in the country, in one hit, for a few days, this government will have to listen, because they're bankrupts.
So an all-out, you mean an all-out general strike?
Everywhere.
Well, it won't be in the public. It won't be in the public sector, because they're all cheering on. Migrants welcome.
Yeah, and even we need to go further. Tesco's, Morrison's, tell them that we're not going to shop in their shops unless you stop these legal migrants on motorbikes.
Do you know what? This thing, I've had a thing with my local supermarket, because we've got all the people on the bikes, whether they're legal or illegal, I don't know, but like riding on the pavement. I've said, why are you in basically allowing this to happen on your watch? But exactly, well, also people need to stop. Maybe people get off their fat backsides and walk to the takeaway and get their food. You know.
Can I just say something? The other Saturday, I was in the shopping centre, and the traffic wardens are giving people tickets on their cars, and all these migrants are on tons of motorbikes, all on...
You don't know if they're migrants?
Well, I don't know exactly, but believe me, a lot of them are, right? And I said to him, why haven't you ticketed none of these? And do you know what he said to me? They're allowed to stay there for 2 hours. But no one else is allowed to stay there.
Yeah, so the bikes, even though they're still blocking the road in the same way. Yeah, completely. Don't. I'm with you. Appreciate that, Richard. Thank you. Well, he supports what Nigel Farage is expected to announce. Let's talk to John, who is in Bradford. Hello, John.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Very well indeed. I think you're speaking, sounds like you're inside a bubble somewhere. Can you get closer to your phone?
Yes, can you hear me now?
That's a bit better, thank you. What do you want to say, John?
Well, I back everything that Nigel says, and I'm a member of Reform, but it's going to have a very difficult job. First, he's got all the lefties in the House of Lords, and then he's got the blob.
Yeah.
So what he's going to have to do from day one is to say, right, the House of Lords is abolished, we'll have a general election, and each party will be able to nominate one member to the upper house for every 2 MPs they've got. And then the party with the biggest majority is going to get the biggest amount of representative in the upper house, and then they'll get their policies through. That is number one.
Okay.
Number two, if they get in power, each minister should have some specialists to advise them. Forget the blob. So if it's, for instance, the NHS, you get people from private hospitals who advise the government.
Yeah, I mean, they do have special advisors, but I think more blatantly political appointee senior figures in it rather than civil servants.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
And then they need to cut the civil service by at least 60%.
Oh, I'm loving that. I mean, I certainly think we need a massive clear out of civil servants. And there's certainly a new contract issued very clear. If you're not willing to do the job you're paid to do as a servant to the public, bye-bye, you're gone. Abolishing the House Lords. We're going to talk a little bit about the Lords, some changes happening in the House Lords. The thing is, if this was in a Reform manifesto, the Lords would be under constitutional convention. They can't block it.
Well, they do anyway, don't they?
No, they wouldn't be able to block it.
Well, they just talk it out, don't they?
No, they literally can't. They can't talk it out. They can't block it. I promise you, they can't block it. This is a long... Not that it wouldn't stop them trying, but yeah, I think a lot of people... There is a point when if a Democrat... That's the same with the European Convention on Human Rights. When a democratically elected government can't do something they've been elected to do, you need to change the system. John, so appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. Just let you know that Nigel Farage has just appeared on stage in Oxfordshire. We will keep you posted on what he has to say. He's standing in front of behind a podium saying Operation Restoring Justice. That, of course, is the name of his plan for deporting all illegal boat arrivals and all of the other issues that I've laid out. We're going to talk about that up next with Trevor Kavanagh. He's the former political editor of The Sun. That's coming up next. Do keep your calls coming in. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:35 is the time. Nigel Farage is already now delivering his plan for mass deportations. Again, there'll be an awful lot of pearl clutching and handbags being raised by the, the people who've been in charge for the last 20 or 30 years and overseen this absolute, I don't know, fog show. I'm trying to think of a phrase I can use that we have been seeing with not just illegal migration, but also legal migration. People arriving legally but overstaying their visas. There's probably a million plus of those people, by the way, in the country. Mass deport all of them, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think that's a controversial statement. If you don't have a right to be in a country, you shouldn't be in that country, and the country has a right to get rid of you. If you don't want to go back to the country that you've come from, we'll send you somewhere else. Seems to me to be all very, very reasonable. What happens to you after that point? Not entirely sure it's our problem. That is the view of Nigel Farage, the Reform leader, but it's certainly not the view of most of the political and media classes who've been in charge of what actually happens in this country in the last few years. Well, let's talk about all this now with Trevor Kavanagh, who knows all this far too well as former political editor of The Sun. A very, very good morning to you, Trevor.
Hi, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. We've outlined in quite a lot of detail what Nigel Farage is saying today. I mean, it's pretty much all been announced. He's been talking about how the country is in total despair. It's interesting that he's named this plan Operation Restoring Justice, and that's how a lot of people will see it. But what do you make of the fact that it's still always described in, BBC articles and like as controversial?
Well, I was delighted to watch you struggling for words that you can actually express on air. And I think millions of people, and I think this talk stations listeners will feel the same way. What has happened over the last 2 or 3 weeks since the High Court ruling on the Bell Hotel in Epping is absolutely extraordinary, and indeed it's historic. I think that we're having a form, at the moment, we're on the brink of a form of non-aggressive civil war, and Nigel Farage is leading one side. And basically, it's the overwhelming majority of the British public, the voting public, against this elected government. And they see it as having failed dismally, not just having failed because it can't do it, but willfully failing because it won't do the things that they want done on immigration.
And this is the thing, we're constantly told, this is a far-right view, a bigoted view, when we all know perfectly well it's not. And I had a conversation with some old family friends of mine. I mean, card-carrying Labour through, in their hearts, you cut them, they would bleed Labour, and they're just like, we've got to do something about this. Yeah, absolutely, get them out. People across the political divide are saying this, and I think Labour have woken up to the fact that an awful lot of their Labour voters who turned to the Tories over the years wanted Brexit, who are turning to Reform now and likely to at the next election, they're having to wake up to this. Do you think that there is any genuine belief, willingness, understanding within the Labour Party and the Labour government that this is an issue that needs to be dealt with, as opposed to one that needs to be sort of taken off the front pages? So, get them out of the hotels, have them in lots of different houses of multiple occupancy so we don't really notice them as much and we don't notice the bill as much. Do you think this is about them getting off the front pages rather than dealing with the actual fact of, a couple of 100,000 people who've arrived here illegally, frankly, a million plus who are also here having arrived legally but stayed illegally, who are in the country and shouldn't be?
Well, they're absolutely aware of what is going on, and they're running scared, if not downright terrified, of the likely consequences of their inaction. And that is that they're going to lose the next election. Yeah. I think that Nigel Farage, if the polls are right, and I think they are, and the gap is getting bigger, is nailed on to win the next election, and by a significant majority. This is now entrenched. The anger towards this Labour government is entrenched and irreversible. And I think that the only way that they could manage to get out of this fix would be to do things which are utterly alien to every fibre of their being. For instance, Denmark is not a far-right, fascist, racist country, and yet it has reduced immigration to zero, illegal immigration to zero, by implementing a number of simple policies like denying illegal immigrants any form of welfare, and destroying areas that are turning into, demolishing areas that are turning into ghettos.
Yep.
And we could do that very easily, but we won't, because it goes against the grain of the Stam rights and the blob, and indeed the whole of the public sector.
Yeah, I mean, and that is the thing, and that's why, again, it's always described as controversial when protecting your borders, preventing unknown people from foreign countries, when you're war-torn, arriving in your country, this is such base, job number one of any government. What did you make of Nigel Farage's conversation? I think it was with the Times, when they asked, okay, what about someone who, if you deport them back to Afghanistan or Eritrea or Sudan or wherever, if they are going to face reprisals in their home country? And he said, I don't think the world's problem should be our problem, to all intents and purposes. He basically said, to all intents and purposes, I don't really care. What do you make of that? Do you think he was echoing general British view on that, and will that survive someone being sent home, maybe facing torture or being killed, and that being all over our front pages? Do you think the public will change their mind then?
Well, first of all, I think the general public will have been cheering to the rafters every word that Nigel Farage was saying. Secondly, I don't think that we're going to see people sent back to be tortured and executed and jailed for daring to leave their countries. I think that in the end, we won't be sending people back to the Taliban in Afghanistan. Yeah. We'll be sending them to other places, or indeed doing what I suggest and what Farage and others have suggested, which is to deter them in the first place. And one of the ideas that has been raised, and I can't understand why it hasn't been introduced, is to use drones to identify the people in the boats who are actually at the tiller, the ones who are steering the boats to these shores. And so when they step on British territory, they are arrested immediately and sent back to France. And you wouldn't need to do that very often before people were ceasing to volunteer to steer the boats.
Yeah, because normally the people smugglers basically, they jump off the boat very quickly once they're into international waters, don't they? And they then head back to France. They don't do the whole journey.
You get Face ID that would be able to recognise them. It's a simple thing. It's happening in other countries. It's happening in Greece. Why couldn't it happen here?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think to me that's sort of like literally a drop in the ocean in terms of the problem.
It would stop them immediately. If people were going to be arrested and deported for steering a boat here, who would bring the boats over? I think a lot of those people would be willing to take the risk if they thought that they weren't going to be identified. It would take no time. The key thing is it has to be really clearly seen. You get off a boat here, you disappear into a camp. Conditions aren't very nice. You haven't got your free mobile phone and everything. It's not going to be, it's not going to be hell on earth, but it's not going to be very pleasant. You're not able to work on the black market, not able to. Crucially, and this is another key part of this business model, is the illegal migrants often, they pay back the people smugglers later. They come over, the people smugglers have got their passport, got their details, know where their families live, and they can face reprisals if they don't. They then put them to work in the black market. They keep a share of their income. I mean, this is an organised, massive organised criminal ring. So if they're just sitting in a camp and then going to be detained, they're no use to the people smugglers as well. I mean, that's another aspect of this. All of that is true, of course, and but you have to ask why people are travelling all the way across Europe to get to Britain.
Yeah.
It is, as the French have described it, the El Dorado. It is the benefits, the handouts, the free food and accommodation and so on, which clearly in countries like Denmark, which, as I say, is hardly an illiberal regime, they've been denied and their immigration has been reduced to zero. They are bound by exactly the same, indeed, more restrictions. I mean, they have freedom of movement.
Yeah.
We don't, or shouldn't.
Yeah, it is extraordinary, all the things we were told we couldn't do in the EU. Well, again, we can do anything we want. We're a free and liberal, sovereign nation. So, I mean, it is just utterly bizarre, isn't it? But again, it's amazing how much Germany and Denmark have been able to do when we were told that we wouldn't be able to do it in the EU. Can I ask you also about the latest figures? And again, we're seeing more and more of this. And this stuff was very much not put into the public domain, and I think very deliberately, showing that foreigners account for 1 in 7 sexual offence convictions in the last year, including rapes. So the number of sexual offences convictions of foreign nationals has increased by 62% over the last 4 years. At the same time, we've seen sexual offences by British nationals increased by 39%. So we are looking at a big increase in crime, but also the scale of convictions. 1 in 7 people living in this country were not born abroad, and yet 1 in 7 people in this country 1 in 7 sexual offence convictions are being committed by people who are born abroad. You know, that tells us that something is going on that, well, people are understandably concerned about.
Understandably concerned. I think they're absolutely livid. They're outraged that people from a totally alien culture are coming to this country and doing things that are intolerable.
We're saying it's not all Canadians, it's not Canadians and Italians who are doing this?
No, but I mean, who is it then, Julia?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, what can we say that we can actually express in words without breaching what they're trying to bring in as a blasphemy law?
Yeah.
And just relate this back to the Pakistani gang rapes.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same thing. That is the essence of what we're seeing, and it's being introduced to this country because we're failing to stop it.
Yeah, it's really that simple, isn't it? And again, and people who talk about it, accused of being bigots, etc. Just finally, I just want to ask you about, again, it's a very Westminster bubble story, this, to a certain extent, although, of course, it extends all the way to Brighton. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, has been accused of having a big sort of property portfolio, her burgeoning property empire, because she's bought her third home. Actually, it's her second home. She owns a home in her Ashton-under-Lyme constituency. She's also bought a holiday flat, we're told, for between £700,000 and £800,000 in Brighton. She also has a grace and favour sort of free apartment given to her as Deputy Prime Minister in Westminster. But there's been a lot of criticism of this. Now, is she a hypocrite because she has criticised people buying second homes, pricing people out of the market? Is she a hypocrite for that? Is there a question mark over her finances, how she's been able to afford a second home at this sort of price, well out of the reach of most people in this country?
Well, I personally don't begrudge her ballooning property portfolio.
Too.
It's just that she begrudges or seems to begrudge everybody else who's doing it. I mean,
she has criticised people.
Tory voter wants to buy a home of their own and maybe even a second home. But this is the deputy leader of the Labour Party, the Labour government. And the hypocrisy is just so rank, it beggars belief. That it's another example of the old communist regime.
Yep.
Do what I say, not what I do.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Talk more about that throughout the show. Thank you very much indeed, Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor of The Sun. 10:48 is the time. Going to take a quick break. Then we are going to be talking to the former Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, Fleur Hassan-Nahum, about those Israeli airstrikes on a hospital in Khan Yunis, which killed 20 people, including 5 journalists. We'll get in more detail to you also about what Nigel Farage has been saying, what Zia Youssef is now saying in terms of their illegal migration policy. Do give us a call to have your say. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Immigration has always been one of the sort of big 3 subjects where you compare it to the cost of living crisis and the NHS, but it just seems to be ratcheting up even higher. Now, it's all very well and good having smaller policies and saying there's no silver bullet. It's going to take a whole plethora of policies to actually get on top of dealing with illegal migration.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:50 is the time. Tom Slater is still with me. Tom Slater, I just want to come to you first before we go to our next guest. I want to talk about the Israeli airstrikes for which the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has actually issued a statement where it's talking about his regret and the tragic mishap of 20 people being killed in a double strike on a hospital in Khan Yunis. 5 journalists included in this. What do you make of that?
Well, I think the choice of words mishap is probably slightly unfortunate, given that if, after a full investigation, which I'm sure the IDF will conduct, because contrary to popular belief, they are not some sinister, evil organisation, if that is indeed what's taken place here, I think mishap doesn't quite capture how horrific this is. Obviously, this is war. This is a war in a place in which the enemy, in the form of Hamas, will happily bed into civilian infrastructure, making tragic miscalculations like this even more likely. But as ever with this conflict, it always pays to wait for the full amount of information, not least given that on top of the usual sort of fog of war that you get, you've got propaganda being pumped out from a jihadist terrorist group whose connection and fealty to the truth, shall we say, has never been particularly strong.
I think you'll find, according to the BBC, everything they say is absolute God's honest truth. But there we are. Let's talk about this with Fleur Hassan-Nahum. She's the Israeli Foreign Ministry Special Envoy. She's a former Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem and joins us once again. A very good morning to you, Fleur.
Good morning, Julia.
Now, we've had a number of claims over the horrific last couple of years, since October the 7th, where, you know, Hamas have claimed that Israeli forces have struck a hospital, destroyed the whole hospital, killed 200 people, 500 people, I think, at one point. Turned out to be completely untrue. It was a weapon fired at the very beginning of the war, a weapon fired from within Gaza, and actually it was a very small number of people who had died. We've also had a number of journalists who have died, many of whom, it has been quite categorically proven, have ridiculously close links with Hamas, so members of Hamas or other jihadi organisations, some of whom were in Israel on October the 7th celebrating those horrific attacks. However, in this case, we're talking about a strike on a hospital which the IDF has admitted was them, a double strike, not just journalists, but 15 other people also killed. How does a mistake like this happen? I mean, the IDF is known for its precision, and they know where the hospitals are. So what on earth could have happened?
We don't know, Julia. Again, if it was a terrible mistake, then the IDF will do its investigations. And Israel, whenever it has made a mistake, it has shown regret. It has changed the way that things are done, or chain of command. This has happened before. We are we're fighting a war in a very, very difficult terrain, because it's urban warfare. What does it mean? And I think Tom said it better than me. Essentially, you got the Hamas terrorists who don't even wear uniforms. That's the first law of war. It's the first war crime in this situation. They don't wear uniforms. They're pretending to be civilians. B, they have tunnels under hospitals, or like somebody else said once, they don't build hospitals, they don't build tunnels under hospitals, they build hospitals over tunnels. They've got an incredible amount of hospitals, more than in Israel, because that is the decoy for the actual tunnel opening, which is where they keep their terrorism infrastructure. And of course, like you mentioned, you've got these journalists, some of them are working for Hamas, some of them are sympathetic to Hamas, and some of them are just scared of Hamas. So there's very little objective journalism there. But again, if there are innocent people there, and it looks at the moment that there were, then unfortunately, these are the horrible, tragic casualties of war. In everything that we've been through in the last 2 years, when you look at the numbers, even when you take Hamas numbers of 60,000, Israel believes that 30,000 of those are terrorist combatants. And so this type of, you can't talk about people's lives in this way, but this type of casualty, innocent casualty to combatant rate is better than any other war in the last 100 years.
I mean, that's the thing. I liken this often to, where we're in COVID. Suddenly people were being told death rates every day. People didn't think that people had died before then. People would be astonished to discover what the civilian to combatant death rate was in pretty much any war that Britain or any of our Western allies have fought in recent and further back years. 1.5 to 1.3, depending on the figures you can see. And the reality is, we don't really know. There's even the Iraq war all these years on, we don't know how many people died entirely, because in a war you don't. And yet somehow Gaza authorities, i.e. Hamas, put out a figure, within hours, telling us exactly how many people have died and who they were and civilians. Never happened in wartime before. Suggests that perhaps this isn't actually the case. Here's the thing, though. I mean, we don't know about these journalists, whether they're genuine journalists or not. Israel has faced again and again demands for Western journalists, independent journalists, to be allowed in. But pretty much every picture, and we've got images right now, every single image that comes out of Gaza has been approved by Hamas. It doesn't get out otherwise. No one's allowed to go and film. No one's allowed. It doesn't get out of the country. It's as simple as that. That's the footage we see. But a lot of those journalists we've seen, are blatantly open. You can see from their own postings on social media, they are supporters of Hamas. They celebrate, and not saying the case of these 5, but in some of the other cases we've seen in recent weeks, they have actually blatantly and openly supported what happened on October the 7th. Some of them are actually employed by Hamas or other jihadi groups within Gaza, and yet they're treated as if they're independent journalists when they're clearly not.
Yes, Julia, we had journalists who actually was holding hostages and was beating and abusing them on a daily basis. The hostages
An Al Jazeera
that were rescued from these apartments. Yes, these are the journalists, so-called journalists. We have journalists who were part of the massacre on October 7th. So we have to take this word journalist with a pinch of salt. But ultimately, Julia, whether they are or they're not, if it was a mistake, as your commentator said, Israel will own up to that mistake and try and change the way that it works so that these mistakes don't happen again, because we are a society with rules, with law and order. We're a democracy. When you're dealing essentially with a terrorist group that has no rules, that loves to sacrifice their own people because it looks good on camera, and ultimately they knew that these things would happen, and they were counting on these things to happen. And it's a very, very difficult war when we care more about the civilians than they do.
Yeah, and indeed, well, I mean, we right now, I'm just looking at the footage we're putting out, those who are watching on YouTube or on their connected devices, we're doing Hamas's propaganda work for them, because you've got people carrying children. No one wants to see slain or sickly children or starving children.
Nobody.
And you know as well as I do, again and again, pictures of children, horribly emaciated children particularly, put on the front pages of the newspapers, whether it's the New York Times or Sunday Express or the Daily Mirror last week. They are exposed as children who have actually have either been evacuated from the war, and that's, I've got these pictures for a long time, or they're children often with long-standing congenital illnesses and problems, which is why they look so emaciated. But this is Hamas propaganda. I mean, right now, what we're putting out right now on picture is Hamas propaganda.
Yes, because they're the only show in town, because they're the only ones controlling those images.
Shouldn't you let Western journalists in then?
Oh, I was going to come to that, absolutely. So people say, well, why doesn't Israel let journalists in? And I will say that if we do let journalists in, then those journalists are definitely going to be at risk. They could become also the casualties. And
Isn't that up to them?
Yes, but we don't need more human shields, Julia. We're dealing with so many already. Everybody seems to have forgotten. I'm sure you haven't. Do you remember when Alan Johnson from the BBC was taken hostage by Hamas and wasn't let out in 6 months? You know, he's been awfully quiet about that traumatic experience, but it seems like everybody's forgotten.
Very
the BBC journalist was taken hostage by Hamas, and nobody speaks about that. And yes, maybe Israel should let journalists in, but we knew that we couldn't prosecute the war the way we wanted to, because we don't want to put those journalists in harm's way.
All right, but Netanyahu said he would let people in. That's not just not happened yet. Whether that would change things on the ground, who knows? Fleur Hassan Nahum, Israeli Foreign Minister Special Envoy, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to get Tom Slater's views on this in just a couple of moments. I was going to talk more about what has been announced by Nigel Farage and Zia Youssef at their press conference today about how they're going to tackle illegal migration. We'll get to that, get your calls as well. This is Talk.
My message to people smugglers is this. I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Smash, 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 smash the gangs. Smash the people smuggling gangs.
People schmiggling puns.
He couldn't even smash an avocado for a piece of toast.
Or the people... What would that? The people...
I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Well, it might be if you smashed any, if you found any.
The people smash... the smash...
And he hasn't smashed anything. I mean, literally all he does is he smashes records every sort of couple of weeks, where more and more people come in a period of 24 hours.
Smash the gangs that are running this vile trade.
You're never going to smash the gangs. That's something that basically is impossible. The gangs are like the Hydra. You cut the head off and another two grow.
So I did write to ministers and say that I wasn't convinced that smashing the gangs was the right sort of way of thinking about things.
We will smash the gangs that undermine our security.
Keir Starmer has just tweeted 15 minutes ago. He says, "I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source." Maybe I'll just read it all in his accent, shall I?
There is no return to freedom of movement. We have left the EU. I do not accept that prevents us working with other police units here, with prosecutors here, to smash the gangs.
Well, I'm sure the smuggling gangs are absolutely quaking in their boots now. Keir Starmer's on their case. Solving this issue, smashing the gangs, is that the impossible dream, Tom?
It really seems beyond him at the minute, I have to say.
We're going to get the evil people smugglers and we're going to smash them and we're going to put them in jail. That will solve the migrant crisis. Prime Minister Keir Starmer's promise to smash the gangs has resulted in just 5 convictions. Hurrah for operating small boats.
So what he really wants to say is that this policy of smashing the gangs is a total and utter disaster. There isn't a cat in hell's chance that it's going to work.
It's crap. It's crap. That's what he's basically saying.
I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. Mark my words, I will take back control of our borders. That means cutting migration, ending the use of asylum hotels and ramping up our efforts to stop small boat crossings.
It's like a parallel universe, the real world as told by the impressive David Bolt, and Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves' fantasy world.
We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. We're approaching at 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. Thank you very much for joining us here at Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DB Plus Radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, your connected device, it's great to have your company. Don't forget to go to my YouTube page. The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show is what we called it. You can hit subscribe, then you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking more about what Nigel Farage has been having to say and is still saying at a press conference in Oxford today. He's accused Keir Starmer of siding with international courts against the British people, and he set out his plans for the mass deportation of illegal migrants. He's been asking whether or not the PM wants to protect Britain's borders and citizens, or does he want to remain wedded to outdated international treaties and judges' rulings. I think we all know the answer to that one. Plus, police have arrested more than 400 people at this year's Notting Hill Carnival over the bank holiday weekend. There were 2 stabbings. This, of course, makes it a jolly good show and far less violent than last year when 2 people were killed. But is that really the standard we should hold this public event to? Plus, the number of sex crimes committed by foreign nationals has increased by 62% in the last 4 years. Astonishingly, 1 in 7 sex crimes are committed by a foreign national in this country. And 1 in 7 men in this country are not foreign. Plus, female students are going to be forced to share toilets and changing rooms with men, as many universities are set on ignoring the Supreme Court's ruling back in April on single-sex spaces being based on biological sex. Sounds like it's time to get the lawyers in. It's an easy win, ladies. Do it. Anyway, that's all coming up. Plenty more besides. Joining me this morning, I'd like to say, is Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. Thank you very much for joining us. I do want to get your thoughts on what's been going on in Israel in a few moments' time. But obviously the focus is all about reform, Nigel Farage, and what to do about illegal migrants today. Nigel Farage still on stage, looking quite animated, I have to say, talking about his plan to deal with illegal migration. Operation Restoring Justice, it's being called. He has been talking about how without action on immigration there is a genuine threat to public order. I think he's right on that, isn't he? He says the mood in the country is a mix between total despair and rising anger. I think that's a fair summary. And he says we have to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, ECHR, no ifs, no buts. He said it might have been a good idea over 80 years ago, but not now. And he says the only way we will stop the boats is by detaining and deporting absolutely anyone who comes via that route. If you come to the UK illegally, you will be detained, you will be deported. And he insists he is the only party leader who can be trusted on illegal immigration. I can't think of anything I disagree with there, Tom Slater. What about you?
Well, what we've already had the detail briefed. I suppose what we've got now is the rhetoric. And again, I think this is something that
usually the other way round, isn't it?
We've got a hell of a lot of people who will sympathise a lot with what he's saying. I mean, I think one key line in his speech so far was he turns to Keir Starmer, figuratively speaking, and says, whose side are you on?
Yep.
That's a really powerful argument when you have a country which has overwhelmingly, election after election, even some referenda that we could talk about, voted to control the borders, to bring down immigration, particularly to crack down on illegal immigration, which I think across the spectrum of British society everyone realises is a huge problem. And yet it's never happened. You're now lumbered with a government, a Labour government, which isn't even really pretending to take this issue seriously. I mean, it does a little bit around the edges.
Oh,
but
they're
definitely
doing. They're definitely making an attempt at pretending.
Oh, that's
but no one.
I don't want to be unfair to them. They are trying to
They've
pretend.
detained 100 people. I mean, more than 100 people come across every day.
Yep.
They've detained 100 people. I'm assuming all young men.
They managed to get the
and
French,
they're going to deport them, apparently.
They managed to get the French to film one video of them knifing a dinghy, and that was great guns. I mean, it's one of those things where this issue has obviously been building for a long time. To see the Conservative Party running around and criticising the Labour government for continuing to open hotels, even though they're the ones who opened those hotels, is it sticks in the craw. But right now, you've got Labour carrying the can for decades' worth of failures in this area. They have no response to
I'm going to say this. They started it. Tony Blair started it.
And Reform are clearly spying that point where they can, first of all, come up with some clear-cut solutions which command public support, which I think most of the things that we're talking about will command public support. But also they've got the credibility. No one, when Keir Starmer says he's smashed the gangs, no one believed them. When the Tories say anything on this issue, quite rightly the response is, where were you for the past 14 years? Where this is the opening, the kind of historic opening that Reform have been handed by the failure of those two other parties.
And he's not Johnny come lately to this, following the polls. This is something he has been, Nigel Farage has been talking about for years, and has been accused of being a bigot, far-right, racist, Nazi, xenophobe, you name it. He's been talking about this stuff, and more people are now aware of it. An awful lot of people who are not concerned about this issue, and we're told this is in the top 3 polling issues, and then we're told by the great and the good, oh, well, if you're much more concerned about the pound in your pocket or about your child's future or the NHS. Well, yeah, we are concerned about those things, but we'd have more pounds in our pocket if we didn't have people in asylum hotels costing the country billions every year. And we would have a much nicer future for our children if they weren't actually feeling unsafe and weren't literally unsafe on the streets as a result of having a migrant hotel near them. You talk about crime. We say, again, these aren't all illegal migrants, but there is a serious issue that we need to address when it comes to access to schools, access to the NHS. Because no, not every person who comes from abroad is working in the NHS. Can we all stop this abject nonsense? Access to housing, social housing in particular, the taxes that we're paying, the criminality we are seeing on our streets. There is a clear link between all of those and migration as a whole, certainly mass uncontrolled migration. Now that includes both legal and illegal. I think everyone who's sane's number one concern is illegal migration, is people, young men largely of fighting age, turning up, on boats, having paid people smugglers, 100%. If people genuinely still think most of these people are asylum seekers, they are simply not paying attention. They really, really are not. Now, one of the interesting things that Nigel Farage has just been asked by, you'll never guess who, Channel 4 News. I know, what a surprise. They asked Nigel Farage how it would sit with him if there was a case of someone being deported back to their home country who was then tortured or killed as a result of arriving back in that country. Nigel Farage replied, "We cannot be responsible for all the sins that take place. The primary duty of a British government is to protect its own people." Now, I think 5 years ago, he would have been wary of saying that. I think he might have thought it, but been wary of saying it. I think even 2 years ago. I think now the public mood has changed so much that people are just like, yeah, I don't care. When I hear about migrants dying in the Channel and they drown, I'm really sorry. I kind of shrug now. I'm just like, you knew the risks, you took the stupid risk, you were perfectly safe somewhere. If you're in France, you're perfectly safe. You're not fleeing France. I fled France on an EasyJet flight, yesterday. Do you know what I mean? It's nonsense. I think people are just saying, you know what? It's not our problem anymore. I don't care. Not our problem.
On the point of people dying in the Channel, it's one of those things where I'm always really struck by the fact that you have these hypothetical situations asked of Nigel Farage by Channel 4 News, saying, what if one person who's sent back to an Afghanistan or an Eritrea or whatever it might be, what happens if they ended up actually being tortured? The question is never flipped on the other side of this argument. What about every time that you're having people dying, making these crossings, not just across the English Channel, also into the Mediterranean? All these things are kind of connected in terms of how people are moving through the continent. I think people would recognise it's a slightly facile argument to hang every death around the necks of people who are allowing this situation to continue. And also I think what we could end up, because of the fact that governments across Europe are all shifting pretty much in the same direction on this issue right now, it opens up another question about, well, maybe what we need to look afresh at this issue. If refuge needs to be provided, it needs to be provided in neighbouring countries, safe, but still not, incentivising people to traipse halfway across the world. Maybe the question of processing in other places, again, safe, provided for, but not in the territories
But again, I don't even
involved.
know if it's our problem.
That's something which will potentially
But like Eritreans fleeing, repressive government and whatever conscription in Eritrea. Well, the vast majority of those people, I think, are in Chad. Well then go to Chad. It's Chad's problem. They're the neighbouring country. I just think people are getting to that point. And by the way, Channel 4 should equally ask the question, and I think Nigel Farage's response should be, how will it sit with you if someone is not deported back home and they rape a child or rape a woman? I mean, or they kill someone. How we've got cases, about to go to the courts of alleged assaults by asylum seekers, people claiming illegal migrants living in these hostels. And again, I'm not want to prejudice any trials, but there have been cases where people have been convicted on such charges. So if anyone gets sent home by our government and then they end up facing retribution, we're responsible. But okay, so if you don't want people sent home, every time someone is the victim of a crime by someone who is here illegally, you're responsible. I mean, have that on your head. And again, I'm with Nigel Farage. I don't think these people are our responsibility. If they genuinely fear going home, then we'll send you somewhere else. We'll send you to the Ascension Islands, which do not look a particularly hospitable place, but I mean, if you're that worried about your safety, you'd be happy to go there. But let's just go through some more of what they were announcing today. So detaining and deporting all illegal boat arrivals. Now that will be people who've arrived already, but my guess is, the aim would be to get people who've already arrived here. We've got a backlog, 120,000, 150,000. The reality is, though, are you going to be able to get those people? Because as soon as they're in power, I mean, those people are just going to disappear. I mean, they're just going to disappear into the black market. But no bail, no right of appeal, a statutory duty on the Home Secretary to deport. They're going to build facilities. They're going to have military bases that are no longer used, and they're going to build new detention centres. I mean, I had an entire year in a porter cabin at my comp, and we all lived. I'm pretty sure that we can put a load of porter cabins or equivalent up. They're going to detain, they say, 24,000 people. But bearing in mind, the moment you start doing that, people are going to stop coming. So you're not dealing with an ongoing problem. You're constantly dealing with the past problem at that point. They want to have a new offence for illegal entry, so you can never claim asylum. There will also be voluntary deportation. They'll give you £2,500, free flight home, bye-bye, 5 charter flights a day, RAF planes for people if the airlines won't take them. Interestingly, Zia Youssef, who was the chair of the party, he said that tearing up identity documents will become a criminal offence, punishable by up to 5 years in prison. I have no idea how you could possibly ever prove that someone has torn up their identity documents.
I mean, maybe that's more signalling than it is anything more substantial.
But don't do signalling. Don't do signalling. You've
what
got
are you going to do? I
enough
mean,
solid.
you're going to have evidence of them.
I dropped it in. Did you deliberately drop it in the channel, or did you? Yeah. I mean, actually, often what is the case is that the people smugglers keep their documents. That's part of the deal. But basically, he says when Nigel is Prime Minister, no human rights law will ever be allowed to block a deportation flight. I mean, I'm with them all the way on this. I say happy to deport to Afghanistan, Iran, Eritrea, wherever. They will deport to Rwanda or Albania if necessary, or the Ascension Islands. But also, crucially, we're looking at scrapping the Human Rights Act, leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, derogating the Refugee Convention, all the human rights sort of furniture that stops us doing a lot of this stuff, we are told right now. And the new British Bill of Rights, including the First Amendment-style rights of free speech. I mean, those are sort of, I suppose, separate to this. But a government saying, a reform government, if they get elected, and the polls keep being pretty sure they will, Operation Restoring Justice. That is how I think most people will see it.
No, absolutely. I think restoring common sense as well. I mean, this is one thing that Farage said in some of his interviews leading up to his big press conference today, was that it wasn't actually that long ago that the British state, even under New Labour, even under Tony Blair, recognised that you couldn't just essentially turn a blind eye to illegal migration. The fact that you had David Blunkett, the former New Labour Home Secretary, coming out in recent days and saying, at least temporarily, the European Convention on Human Rights needs to be suspended. We need to get a grip on this particular issue. Reminds you that, yes, you know, in large part, these problems and the kind of dysfunction that we've seen on our asylum system is a relatively recent phenomenon. It's something because partly governments and the state have just totally lost control, but also because they've been captured by an ideology or just by a general kind of mood and vibe that it's somehow grubby, unfair, unpleasant to enforce your own borders to any degree whatsoever. So I think what we're really seeing here is, I think what a lot of people will see, what Farage is talking about today, is not necessarily some radical departure from where we have been for many, many years in the post-war period of UN conventions and human rights. I think they'll see it as a return to just the kind of mean, the return to what was sensible, what felt like 5 minutes ago.
Well,
and
that's the thing. Again, this is just so completely at a different scale, isn't it? Nigel Farage has been asked in the last few moments about what about women and children under this migration policy, because it is largely men. And he's confirmed that women and children would be detained under the migration policy, bearing in mind, of course, when they were talking, I think previously under the Tories, of they wouldn't detain women, they wouldn't deport women and children. Then, well, then there was going to be already a market, and all the experts, the border force experts that we all speak to, pointed out there would then be a market, you know, right, that will supply a woman that you can claim as your wife and a child. You're then looking at even more exploitation of people. But he did admit, he said that the issue of unaccompanied children was much more complicated. But again, these people, they are turning up, they're being put on these boats by adults, for goodness sake. So we're into different territory there. But again, we're not talking about things on the same scale. And again, we're talking often about, if you're talking about unaccompanied children, you're talking about a 17-year-old young man in lots of cases.
And scale is the point. You've got to reduce the scale of this, because we can talk about edge cases all day, but the fact is there are so many cases, it becomes very difficult to discuss
and there will be people who are genuinely seeking refuge, seeking asylum. But again, why are you doing it here? Why not in, say, Chad or in any other European country you've passed through? None of you have arrived in England just out of the blue. We've got people who are claiming asylum from Pakistan, for God's sake, from India. I mean, this is utterly, utterly ridiculous. It really is. I'd love to hear your reaction to this, from what you've heard from Nigel Farage so far today. And Zia Youssef, what do you make of this? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. But as you know, I mean, my audience and Tom, you'll know, if I don't think a policy makes sense, I called them out on Ukraine. This nonsense about allowing trans-identified male prisoners in women's prisons. This is not official policy, but Nigel Farage said he'd be guided by their advisor on this. I call it out. I always call it out. On this, I'm yet to find something I don't like, other than I think this tearing up identity documents. I just don't think you can prove that, and it's a waste of everyone's time. But the willingness, for instance, to refuse, to use leverage against countries, refuse to take their people back. Yeah, Pakistan, you don't want your people back, fine, no more visas. Frankly, I'm pretty sure we should be cutting some of the routes anyway for people who are coming from countries where we've got a known issue of criminality. This ties into something Rupert Lowe, former Reform UK MP, has pointed out. He instigated this sort of rape gang inquiry. It's nothing judicial, it's not got any statutory rights or anything, but he says their rape gang inquiry has identified 85 local authorities in which gang-based sexual exploitation of children is taking place or has done so historically. Lots of survivors, family members, whistleblowers have approached his organisation, and they're looking at targeted exploitation by predominantly Pakistani men, or gross negligence from public bodies. Now, we'd often heard Rochdale, Rotherham and a few, and people thought that, they were a handful. We've learned in the last couple of years we're looking at 40 to 50 different town cities. They're now looking at 85 local authorities, and it's something that's been raised a lot lately, which is, what about London? London, with huge numbers of people from many different backgrounds, what are the odds that London hasn't got its own grooming gang problem? And now it appears that that is one of the places that is being looked at. It is really important. Look, he's doing this inquiry, looking into trying to get more information. You've got Maggie Oliver, who's one of the whistleblowers in Greater Manchester Police all those years ago. You've got the wonderful Maggie Oliver Foundation, and they are looking at basically bringing prosecutions of people who basically allowed this to continue to happen. There is still movement on this, isn't it? But this all comes down to, fundamentally, a lot of these men were British born but of Pakistani heritage. All of this ties in with, and all the stories about 1 in 7 sexual assaults in this country are now from foreign nationals. They may be living here legally, but they are foreign nationals. This all ties into the idea of people coming to this country who don't want to obey the law, who are bringing their own cultural differences with them, instead of saying, right, I'm leaving that behind, I'm now going to take part in the cultural norms of the country I'm arriving in. These stories all tie in together.
It does. I think the other thing that ties it in together is the extent to which the state has tolerated this, has turned a blind eye to it, has refused to talk about it, has demonised people who did want to talk about it. In the case of the grooming gangs, I think there's plenty of evidence now that particular police forces, in effect,
covered it up.
Turned a blind eye. It's almost too weak to describe it in such terms because of the horrendous sort of judgments that were made there. And that is such the core of the problem. You have the issue itself, and then you have the refusal to admit it's an issue, the demonisation. That's over now. I really think, people talk about the Overton window moving. It's been kicked in on a lot of these issues. People are not willing to put up with the smears and the silencing. You've got people willing to vote in ways that they might never previously have considered. It's easy to forget this now, but in a very short time, Nigel Farage has gone from someone who was a very influential political player, but someone who his parties were really a kind of pressure valve on the Tories.
Yeah, he was sort of dragging the Tories kicking and screaming to some vaguely sensible policies they didn't actually execute.
He's now the presumptive next Prime Minister. Yeah. This has happened in the space of a couple of years, and I think it's because of the fact that all of these issues put together, and the sense that people felt that no matter what they said, no matter what they did, no matter who they voted for, nothing would change. All of that has produced a completely different political landscape now. And however these things shake out electorally remains to be seen, but this is a very different world than it was in a couple of years ago.
And it's a slow process. When I voted for Brexit in 2016, I didn't think overnight. People go, oh yeah, where's your land of milk and honey? Yeah. That's not how it works. The key right in a democracy is not just to elect people that you want to do your bidding. It's to kick out the people who don't do what the public want. That's what people did again and again. I mean, they made the choice, not happy with the Tories, but definitely not Jeremy Corbyn, thank you very much. Boris Johnson was elected with with Nigel Farage's help. He stood down candidates to allow people that there was one vote for Brexit, and it was Boris Johnson full stop in most constituencies. He gifted the premiership to Boris Johnson, who threw it away. Yes, he got Brexit done. He had his hands tied behind his back by Theresa May, still one of the worst prime ministers in British history. We are where we are. But the point is, the Tories can fail to do it, fine. Labour can fail to do it, fine. But you will lose the next election. Full stop. End of. You know, the British people are fed up. We have been very, very, very well behaved. We have stayed calm. We have not seen riots on the streets over these issues. We really haven't. You know, Southport was an exception. We have seen, you know, there's a lot of calm about this, but people are fed up and they are angry. And again, I think this is all part of the whole, you know, the flying the colours, you know, people putting the England flag up and just saying, you know what, we're fed up of being told we're racist. We're fed up of being told our flag's racist. We're fed up of being told that everything we want is wrong and that we should become multicultural and we should celebrate every other culture and every other heritage and everything else, but not our own. And we're fed up with it and we want to be put first. And you know what? In no other country would that be seen as a weird thing to say or think.
No, absolutely. And I think it's also why so much serious pressure is now on reform to properly deliver. There's always been questions.
That's going to be the question mark.
Yeah, exactly. Over, you know, do they actually have the answers? Have they got enough people around them to?
Yeah, but everyone says that. Yeah, but you haven't got the competence of the existing parties. Yeah. Well, they're supposedly competent and existing. How's that working out for us?
And I think we've got to almost absent the other parties from this discussion in a sense, because people need to feel that if a reform government does eventually come to power in whatever shape or form, that it will actually deliver, that we won't see repeat. Because the kind of disaffection we would see potentially if they flopped.
I think this is going to be very hard because they're going to work against the mob. I'll say this right now on camera, and I'll say this to Nigel Farage right now. I will leave this job and I will come and work in government to push this policy through, because I'm willing to take all the flack. I'm willing to take all the name calling. I don't care. I've had it for years and I've been talking about this issue since, about 2000. I've got a long track record on this. I am absolutely willing to go into government on a non-party political basis, go into government to help get that job done, because I think that job needs doing. I'll swear to you right now, I will happily do that. Happy to take on the civil service, happy to take on the House of Lords, happy to take on the human rights lawyers, happy to do that, because this is a job that we need doing. And if we want our country to stay the country that it almost still is for our children, for the future, I'm afraid this is what we're going to have to do. It's going to have to be your, you know, all hands on deck, you know, and we're going to have to do it. And I think it involves everybody. You know, don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. There we are. That's my offer to you, Nigel. Anyway, 11:26 is at the time. I did just want to get you just on Angela Rayner and her 3 homes. Burgeoning property empire we're talking about. Everyone keeps talking about. I couldn't get that excited about this story. No. I was sitting on holiday going, I mean, she owns 2 homes.
Yeah.
A lot. I mean, I only own 1. I have to say, I'd love to buy a second home. I'm not sure. I don't know when you spend the time there. Sounds like a lot of hassle having to deal with 2 sets of lecky bills and everything else to me. But there we are. But she's been under a lot of criticism. But she is nevertheless someone. You know, she has to pay double accounts tax or whatever. She bought a place with Hove, Brighton Hove area. £700,000-800,000. Given her salary, I'm kind of wondering how she's got the money for that. She's got a place in Ashton-under-Lyme, her constituency. She's got a free Grace and Favour home, but she doesn't own that home. But she is a hypocrite, isn't she? Because she has talked about how second home owners are basically, you know, they're pricing. You know, she's on this, you know, big salary, 6-figure salary in London, and she comes down and buys a property for that price, a flat in the Hove. Well, lots of locals in that area, they won't have that sort of money. So she's doing exactly the thing she criticises other people for.
Well, I mean, like you, I struggle to get too upset about this. Is the first point. I mean, it is her second home rather than her third. It's also the fact that you know, when it comes to the charges of hypocrisy, I understand it, because the general message that the Labour Party have been giving off is one that is very kind of anti-second homes. But at the same time, what they basically did was implement policies that the Tory government had already mooted, which is to give local councils a bit more power to add kind of premiums to people who've got second homes, to make it that little bit more expensive for them. Incidentally, Brighton and Hove Council have those policies in place, and she is paying that elevated rate. So in the grand scheme of things, is it the biggest thing to get upset about? No, but any whiff of hypocrisy around this Labour government is particularly toxic, because there has been such a strong gust of it ever since they came into power.
Absolutely, and they always picked up the Tories on it. So, you know, you pay your money, you take, it's your choice. All right, 11:28 is the time. I want to hear your thoughts, particularly on what reformers had to announce today. By the way, Nigel Farage has said exceptions will be made to ensure that Afghan interpreters, those who supported the UK and US forces during the Afghan war, would be given a special right, obviously, to come and stay in this country. country. I think most right-thinking people would agree with that. But do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. Get your messages and your calls. Up next, this is Talk.
They were opened on.
Well, I think the first thing to say is all credit to the Metropolitan Police this weekend. As far as I can see, based on the information that's come out over the last couple of days, they've done a sterling job, which is hugely, hugely challenging policing operation. So 14,000 police officer shifts, 7,000 officers deployed over the course of the bank holiday weekend. But the police deployed live facial recognition, they deployed drone camera technology.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:31 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls on what Nigel Farage has announced today in terms of reforms policy to, well, detain and deport illegal migrants. Tarquin is in London, wants to have his say. Good morning to you, Tarquin.
Julia, so lovely to hear your voice again. Hope you had a good break away from the radio.
I thought Alex Phillips, unfortunately, was too unwell, was in, but he ended up getting Kevin, so that's a little special treat for everyone. And he left the studio quite tidy.
But nobody out JHB's JHB.
Oh.
You're the gal, so great. Glad to have it. I'm delighted, but the delight is more a sense tinged with relief because it needs to be done now. This is the problem, Julia. We can't wait 4 years. How many little girls are going to be fiddled with? How many women are going to be raped? How many men and little boys are going to be tampered with before we get justice, or rather they?
I mean, we're looking at, what is it, 28,000 arrivals so far this year?
Yes, so I hope Nigel and Richard are listening when you offer your services for what I would tell. I said to you, producer, more of a Nuremberg, but more of a Runnymede 2.0, because we need to get our English common law sense of normalcy back and remove this globalist garbage that's destroying our nation. If you could head that up as the chairwoman for that, I'd be absolutely delighted.
I mean, again, for me, I want to do something practical. It's like, how do we solve this? Get in people, some of the guests we have on, the Tony Smiths and, the people who've worked in this field, just get people in. None of this is beyond the wit of man.
No, it's not. And we need to kick the judiciary because they're politicised now.
Oh, 100%.
They can't do it. It needs to be a people's commission of some sort where we, the people, in a grand jury type setup, where it's common sense and normal, like 12 women, men and women, good and true juries. That's what
I'm going to disagree with you, because that's the sort of thing that Just Stop Oil proposed. We've got a people's commission. It's called Parliament. It's who we elect.
No, I agree with you. I wasn't aware of that. In that case, I'll go back on what I just said.
If Just Stop Oil do it, then...
No. Anything they do has got to be just work of Satan, hasn't it? I mean, no. Yeah, absolutely. Let's do what you just suggested. But I think your voice of comment would be amazing. You and Kev and Mike. I mean, why not?
Get us all in. I mean, come the revolution. Come the Republic with Mike. Brilliant. That'd be so much. For Tarquin, we can invite you in as well. Tarquin, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to James, who's also in London. He wants to talk about what Nigel Farage had to announce. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia. Julia, as a proud Brit, firstly, I don't care what the world thinks of us. I don't care.
Yes, exactly.
Because what we need is, Nigel, if you're listening, get the brains together, get your legal people together, because what we need to do firstly is everything from 1997 onwards bought in by that Satanist needs to be thrown out of this country.
He's not a Satanist. Tony Blair was not. Come on, let's, we can do this without that sort of language.
Okay.
Don't go down to their level.
This evil man that basically destroyed this country. He's basically destroyed it, and how he did it was giving a Welsh assembly, a Scottish assembly, so we separate ourselves away from Britain, and now we adhere to everything and let everybody into our country. I'm sick and tired of it. We got a power, it's called aid. We use it. They don't take their people back, we take the money away from them.
I think we should just stop all the mad aid anyway.
And our neighbours across the channel, the French, they're not our friends. We need to start punishing them. If you start letting these people across the seas, we'll start taking their licences off you, because you're not our friend, you're our enemy.
I'm with you. No, I'm with you on that. They really could stop this if they really wanted to, and they choose not to. And again, the way the French government, not the French people, the French government has behaved towards us post-Brexit has been, frankly, an absolute, farce. It's been abominable in terms of punishing the British people for a democratic vote. Tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it? Anyway, James, thank you very much. It didn't sound like he was in London, did he? Welsh Assembly got a mention quite quickly there. James, thank you for that. 11:35 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about the Notting Hill Carnival, because apparently it was a great success, because only 423 people were arrested and there were only 2 stabbings and no one died. This is now what counts as a peaceful event. But we don't hold any other event to the same low standard. So why the Notting Hill Carnival? That's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back. 11:37 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's go right now to our next guest, Mike Neville. He's a former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector. A very good morning to you, Mike.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Now, it's wonderful, wonderful, good news story. Notting Hill Carnival, only 423 arrests. Well, that was what it was at 8 p.m. last night. No new figures since then, as far as I'm aware. We thought that they had a very quiet bank holiday Monday evening in that case, as there were no more. 2 stabbings. No one actually murdered on this occasion. And this is being hailed as a largely peaceful event. In your experience as a Metropolitan Police officer, is 2 stabbings and 423 arrests for 1 million people partying over 2 days, is that a peaceful event or not?
Well, if you compare it with things like the amount of people, I think about 1 million people go to football on a Saturday, and if there was 2 stabbings there every week, then there would be something said about it. It is judged by lower standards. It's shocking, really, and that is simply down to people being afraid of being called racist. And what this means is that people are put at risk because of this event. They won't move it because they're accused of racism. They won't put a cost charge to it, even though the taxpayers are paying absolutely, 10, 12, 13, 14 million pounds. They could.
And there was an extra £1 million emergency fund given for the Notting Hill Carnival in the last few months to sort of help police it all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing that does strike me here, though, is you've got to congratulate the Met. You know, I do come on here sometimes and criticise, but the Met have been very proactive here. You know, they made a lot of arrests. They've utilised the before the event to remove troublemakers. They've put other gang members on bail conditions or recalled them to prison. They've used new tactics like the live facial recognition. So all credit to the Met, but again, Julia, every one of those officers, the 7,000 officers on double-time money, bank holiday, are not patrolling all those other places in London where there's so much crime going on.
And we know, I think it was some 100 or a couple of hundred arrests before, well, 100 actually before the event even started, and people banned from attending the event. We had the instant live facial recognition machines as well, and we had scanners. But it is interesting because it depends what arrests are for and what crimes have been committed, doesn't it? If it's sort of possession of cannabis, a lot of people be frankly a little bit more relaxed about that. Not everyone, but some people.
Well,
but
about 40 were arrested for dealing drugs.
Well, no, that's and Class A drug. That's the thing. So 2 stabbings, neither of which resulted in life-threatening injuries. So well done, everybody. 32 people arrested for assaults on police. That's pretty telling. 46 taken into custody, possession of offensive weapons, so most likely knives. 70 arrested for cannabis possession, 32 possession of Class A drugs, 44 for drug supply. 5 arrests in connection with robbery. 18 people arrested for sexual offences. I mean, you know, some of these are absolutely not remotely trivial events. Now, when we make comparisons, I mean, I've seen some analysis that actually suggests, given the number of people who go to football matches, like actually we're looking at a lower rate. Like, for instance, say trouble outside Wembley, at a major football event, you're looking at a higher level of arrest. But it depends what the arrests are for, doesn't it? The seriousness.
It's not only that, Julia, it's the standards and the criteria. So I've said this on here before, but if you want an experiment in 2-tier policing, you go to Notting Hill and you can abuse the police. You've got to really push it out to get arrested for cannabis. You'd almost have to be smoking it in the officer's face. You can dance with the female officers to the point of indecent assault. And
we've seen some videos, haven't we? I mean, really inappropriate behaviour.
You know, my experiment is this, Julia. So having done all those and not been arresting at Notting Hill Carnival, go to a football match on a Saturday afternoon and do the same things, because you would be swiftly arrested. And it is tragic. It's all down to this fear of being called racist. We've got to be honest with this. I see that Festus, the former PCC, the Police and Crime Commissioner of Bedford, a really eloquent guy, saying that we really need to look at what standards we judge ourselves by here. Why are we judging this to be a success? Like it's laughing. It's said, isn't it? Oh, only 2 stabbings, and we don't know what injuries those have been inflicted long term, whether they may result in some more serious injury. And also, as you say, we only know the arrests up to 7:45 yesterday, and most of the really serious criminal activity happens on Monday night. So
well, exactly, and I'm very surprised not to have seen new figures. I mean, it seemed just looking it up, but also if you compare it to other festivals, you think, oh, it's a festival, there's drugs, there's drink, whatever. Glastonbury Festival, it goes on for 5 days. Actually, most people go for, a day or two longer, actually. But 210,000 people attending for 5 days. There were 31 arrests during the festival this year. 31 arrests, as opposed to, 423. And as you say, different standards being applied here. Now, I used to go to I used to go to the Notting Hill Carnival when I was much younger, and I've spoken on air about this. I stopped going, not because of fears of violence at the time. I think I probably would have stopped anyway when we've had some very violent events in the past. But actually from basically the whole thing just becomes, there's so many people, you're not even dancing and having fun, you're just walking and getting stuck in a crowd. And I ended up in a very, very, very congested area, and I couldn't breathe. It was a bottleneck, and I thought, this is a very big accident waiting to happen. I don't want to be a part of it. It's not for me. But the main issue here is that this is a non-ticketed event attended by anyone who wants to turn up. And it's in a very, very built-up residential area, and most local residents actually have to board up their homes to stop people urinating on their property or having sex on their property or graffitiing it or trashing it, and there's an immense amount of damage done, and a lot of local people are really unhappy about Carnival being there. There's no reason why it couldn't be moved to, a big park.
Yeah, absolutely. We see football matches moved, and we see football grounds change hands and whatever else. different things require different safety measures, and there's been constant warnings by the Metropolitan Police at the highest levels of the dangers of crush here. We only need one spark, somebody to pull out a gun or a knife or somebody to shout something, and then the crush starts, and it'll be children in particular, and the smaller people who'll be who'll be very seriously injured or hurt here.
I am amazed. I'm genuinely, having done, I've probably been to the Carnival about 5 times, I am absolutely amazed, and it's probably doubled in numbers since I went. I'm amazed that we have not seen that happen.
And also, if you control it, you see, you could have that. You could start off in Notting Hill on the Children's Day. They could have their nice costumes. They could march smartly to and within their in the carnival to Hyde Park. Have it ticketed off. Have it barriered. Have knife arches there. Have searches for drugs dogs. Charge some money to get in. So me, you, and anybody else who doesn't want to go, we're not fronting the money up for it. And then everybody can enjoy themselves. We need, you could pay for private security rather than all those different officers, hold it over a weekend and not a bank holiday Monday, significantly reducing the cost of it, and everybody could be happy. But as I've said, there's one factor in this that comes up time and time again, and that is the fear of being called racist. And
because it's a celebration of Caribbean culture. If it was a celebration of, I mean, God forbid, British culture or European culture, if it was celebration of Swedish culture, they wouldn't be the same.
But this is why, Julia, your previous comments about and discussions about criminality and people coming over to this country and committing crime, that has been covered up for decades.
Yeah, and deliberately so.
Listen,
but by politicians who insist on telling us that anyone who claims there is an issue with foreign criminality in our country, that we're racist and wrong. And yet they must have known the figures. I say foreigners account for 1 in 7 sexual offence conviction in the last year, including rapes. 1 in 7 men in this country is not a foreign-born national.
No, so in 1995, I actually I was a young policeman at Clapham, and I did a report into who were the street robbery suspects, and they were young black men. That report was handed to the commissioner at the time, Sir Paul Condon, who was then vilified for releasing what amounted to the truth. And I even saw in the 1990s, I saw a superintendent rip out a page of a report which disclosed uncomfortable facts, and that was done so she could get promoted. These people should be ashamed. And decade after decade, the truth about crime has been covered up. Now, we're fortunate now, at least we have the truth. But we're actually, what gets me, I've got 3 daughters. We are importing violence against women and girls. It is truly shocking. And the politicians who are doing this, telling us it's all about human rights and all international law and all this sort of rubbish, they have no will to stop it, in my view.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Our children and our wives and our daughters and mothers, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike Neville, former Metropolitan Police Detective Inspector, thank you very much on that. Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, still with me. Can I bring you back in on the Notting Hill Carnival? I don't know if you've ever attended, if it's your kind of thing. I mean, I attended many years ago for a number of years. I actually lived very, very, very near there for a while. But it seems to me that, as Mike Neville was right, that we are applying completely different standards.
I know. I think it is an institution. I think most people, certainly Londoners, would like it to continue on in some way, shape or form. I think it's just quite clear that in terms of the policing response, that it needs to be in accordance with the scale of the event. This is an unticketed, open to the public, essential sort of... it requires a level of kind of policing that clearly it's not receiving at this point. The question is, why is that policing not being doled out? And I think some of the points that Mike makes are entirely clear.
But shouldn't the people going to the carnival have to pay for the policing? I mean, if you buy a football ticket, part of your price is the cost of the policing. I mean, why should it be a free carnival?
I think those questions are entirely fair, because it's not as if it has to take place in the precise form that it currently takes place in. Discussions about maybe it should be something which kind of leads up to...
I think it should take place in Keir Starmer's street. No, I always think all these things, just move it to their streets and then see how they feel about it. And you have to board up Downing Street, so you've got people urinating in Downing Street or having sex on the steps. Maybe they'd feel differently about it. But that's what people have to do. 11:48 is time. We're going to leave that now. Take a quick break. We're going to be turning, of course, after midday to reform and Nigel Farage's announcement on mass deportations and detentions, first of all, of illegal migrants. toilets. But up next, we're going to talk about students at some British universities, women who are not going to be allowed to use women's toilets without men being present. Why? Well, because it turns out universities don't think that the law applies to them. Well, should we make them? We'll talk about that with Helen Joyce up next. This is Talk.
Immigration, what is that saying about Britain to the rest of the world, to the global community? What is it saying about what our benchmark is? You know, we're almost saying we don't have high standards anymore for all students up and down the country. And I think it's got to go in tow with, you know, it's one thing scrapping the compulsory research, but if all you're doing is a white paper inquiry, some curriculum tweaks, not allowing schools to really dig deep, going all the way back to primary, all the way through to secondaries.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:50 is the time. Tom Slater's still with me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. We're still waiting for more of your calls. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk to you and more guests about what is going on with the reforms policy on detaining and deporting. Well, a huge number of illegal migrants. Do you think they'll be able to do it? Do you trust they'll do it? I've already offered my services in a non-party political way. I will happily go and help do that job. Do you like to offer your services if reform did get elected and we're serious about doing it? I'm sure that'd be very welcome too. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Right now, let's talk about the law, because the Supreme Court, I thought, was pretty darn clear in April when they established that the law on single-sex spaces was very clear. It was based on biological sex, not what a man or a woman thinks they are on a Tuesday afternoon. It's about what you actually are, not what a piece of paper says, the gender recognition certificate, not whether you've got a wig on or you've put on a pair of fake boobs. No. Are you or are you not biologically female or biologically male? That will decide which toilet or changing room or other single-sex facility you use. Well, apparently not in the case of, well, we know Parliament right now. The Treasury is flouting this as well, but also numerous universities, University College London, Edinburgh, Southampton, Bath and Nottingham, apparently all expecting female students to share toilets and changing rooms with male students who claim that they think that they're women. Well, let's talk about this with Helen Joyce. She's Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters. She's also author of the book Trans, Gender Identity and the New Battle for Women's Rights. A very good morning to you, Helen.
Hi, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, I mean, you were there at the Supreme Court, this amazing decision that was basically, I mean, the fact that we needed a Supreme Court to tell us what difference between the sexes was mind-blowing. But lots of people were saying at the time, that's it, it's all done and dusted, move on. We've still got sporting bodies who haven't got to grips with this. We've got government organisations. We've got numerous charities, the arts, and everything. Universities. Some young women being told they're going to have to share facilities, probably in single-sex dorms and the like, with men who claim that they are women, but because that still counts as being a woman according to them. That is a flagrant ignorance of the law, is it not?
I think it's deliberate. I was sitting in court, as you say, in April when that judgment was handed down, and a very experienced lawyer friend turned to me afterwards and said, there's nothing left for us to do. Well, it turns out that a lot of people are pretending that they don't know what the court said, which, as you say, is very clear. It said that in the Equality Act, male and female mean biology, not paperwork or identity. And the only basis for offering single-sex spaces is on the basis of the Equality Act, because otherwise it's sex discrimination. You have to be permitted to do sex discrimination. So I've explained that to you in, 15 seconds? Yeah. Everybody who asks a lawyer or reads it knows what's happening, but they're all thumb-sucking, stroking their chins.
We're waiting for the Equality and Human Rights Commission to issue some definitive guidance, which they'll ignore as well.
Exactly. I mean, why would you pay attention to the HRC if you're not paying attention to the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court, when it said that was the law the second it said it. Imagine if this was a tax judgment. The next day your accountant would be on to you saying, oh, we had misinterpreted the law. Act quickly or you're going to be charged.
Yeah, and indeed the key point the Supreme Court made was not that they had changed the law. That was what the law had always been. And it was people... I mean, they weren't misinterpreting the law. They were willfully disregarding the law, and they're still doing so now. Could these universities just simply slap on these are unisex facilities sign? Just literally, if you put on a male and female sign, then they're not flouting the law.
Well, it depends. For their workers, their employees, they can't, no, because they have to give decent facilities to workers, and that in most situations will mean actual single sex.
So women, in particular, women have the right to not have to get changed or go to the toilet with men.
That's right. That's right. The only way you can get around having female and male toilets is if all your facilities or lots of your facilities are just single user. Yeah. Students, it's less clear. We'd have to make an argument about indirect discrimination, and I think that would work, but that would mean going back to court. I mean, if they went all gender neutral everywhere. So we are taking some court cases. We have threatened legal action against the Scottish Government, and we are applying for JR or judicial review for the Hampstead ponds, where there's a ladies' pond, a men's pond, and a mixed pond, and they're running the ladies and men's on the basis that if you say you're a lady or a man, in you come.
And again, what I love about that is that people say, well, you know, but the trans-identified people, they're like, no, there's literally a pond which you can use, which is the unisex pond. But I mean, that's the thing. That's such choice for someone to go swimming in Hampstead ponds. I mean, I agree with bringing the case on that because these are principal cases. But we're also talking about a lot of, 18-year-old, young women, and I don't want to describe all students as vulnerable, but they're new adults, they're young people. They're in a new environment, and then they're being forced to share sort of what would normally have been, and certainly in my day and your day, would have been single-sex facilities with men. And we're constantly told by the trans-identified men, because that's what they are. I hate the articles talk about biological males. Men. That's the word, men.
I agree.
Don't get what they're identifying is they're still men. The claim we often hear, certainly on social media, is, but we can't be in the toilets with the men because we might be harassed or beaten or sexually assaulted, so we need to be in with the women. But Helen, correct me, was there a reason why women didn't want men in the toilets with them in the first place? Wasn't that the exact same reason?
I always think that when they open their mouths, they tell on themselves, They're acknowledging the reason why we have single-sex spaces, which is that men can be dangerous to women.
Not all men, but enough men that it's a serious concern. Yeah.
I mean, the universities are in a bit of a difficult position because they have spent the last 10 years kowtowing to activists in their own ranks, academics, but also to very radicalised young people who were taught gender identity stuff in school and turn up believing that unisex toilets or, gender self-ID is the 21st century's great civil rights movement. And now they're going to have to say to them, no, it's not lawful to do it this way. Some of them have, lots of them haven't, and UCL I'm particularly upset about because I did my own PhD there in the 1990s and it was great. So yeah, it's lack of courage, and it's also having to admit that they were wrong for 10 years.
Well, you've got to remember though, but
staff bigots.
They don't think they're wrong because the people in charge are fully signed up to this madness. That's part of the problem. So much of the educational establishment, from nursery schools that celebrate pride to primary schools to secondary schools that invite in trans-identified men who are basically cross-dressers to address their children, and universities, they are imbued in this stuff. I mean, we are going to have the Supreme Court judgment is not going to, and the Cass review into the Tavistock, it's not going to get this out of our educational institutions. Our children are being propagandised right now today.
I think we need a de-radicalisation programme, and it starts with enforcing the law on toilets, because if you're insisting that you know what biological sex is when it comes to toilets and changing rooms, it makes it harder to teach nonsense in the classroom or lecture theatre.
Yeah.
But it's a long way back, Julia. We've been doing this for,
close
on 20 years now.
I said this on the day of the Supreme Court judgment, that I didn't think that this was going to be quite the victory that we thought, because again, if we were going to do things based on common sense, we'd have done it by now. Helen Joyce, you keep up the fantastic work. Honestly, let's crowdfund those legal actions against those universities. Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters, Helen Joyce, thank you very much indeed for that. Tom Slater, again, it's a long battle. Everyone thought, cash review, done. We still know kids are getting puberty blockers, apparently from Mermaid Susie Green, a little way they can get them from a doctor's abroad. We know that, get them online. We thought the Supreme Court was going to decide all this. No, we've still got there are still 2 men in English prisons, for instance, who are men in women's prisons.
I think this is just recognising the scale of the fight that as it existed. The whole kind of gender derangement that took place, it was a kind of legal revolution, it was a medical revolution, it was a cultural revolution. The first 2 skittles have been knocked down formally, but it's that final one which is going to be much more difficult.
Throughout teaching, it's in every educational establishment. Stonewall have totally taken over our education of our children.
But no, it's about pushing back, people being braver, institutions actually showing a bit of leadership and chutzpah, all of these things together.
Get the trans out of our schools. Seriously, get the trans out of our schools. This is a deranged, this is a completely deranged cultural phenomenon which needs to be got rid of. I mean, like that. Again, parents, you need to stand up on this stuff, I'm afraid. Don't let anyone call you a transphobe bigot. You need to stand up. We've been called worse over migration, haven't we? We're going to talk about that up next. This is Talk.
My message to people smugglers is this. I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Smash the gangs. Smash the people smuggling gangs.
People schmiggling puns.
He couldn't even smash an avocado for a piece of toast.
Or the people... What would that... The people...
I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Well, it might be if you smashed any, if you found any.
The people smash... The smash...
And he hasn't smashed anything. I mean, literally all he does is he smashes records every sort of couple of weeks, when more and more people come in a period of 24 hours.
Smash the gangs that are running this vile trade.
You're never going to smash the gangs. That's something that basically is impossible. The gangs are like the Hydra. You cut the head off and another 2 grow.
So I did write to ministers and say that I wasn't convinced that smashing the gangs was the right sort of way of thinking about things.
We will smash the gangs that undermine our security.
Keir Starmer has just tweeted 15 minutes ago. He says, I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source. Maybe I'll just read it all in his accent, shall I?
There is no return to freedom of movement. We have left the EU. I do not accept that prevents us working with other police units here, with prosecutors here, to smash the gangs.
Well, I'm sure the smuggling gangs are absolutely quaking in their boots now. Keir Starmer's on their case. Solving this issue, smashing the gangs, is that the impossible dream, Tom?
It really seems beyond him at the minute, I have to say.
We're going to get the evil people smugglers and we're going to smash them and we're going to put them in jail. That will solve the migrant crisis. Prime Minister Keir Starmer's promise to smash the gangs has resulted in just 5 convictions. Hurrah for operating small boats.
So what he really wants to say is that this policy of smashing the gangs is a total and utter disaster. There isn't a cat in hell's chance that it's going to work. You just can't say it.
It's crap. That's what he's basically saying.
I know you're angry about immigration.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. It's 2 minutes past midday. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. So whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, Julia Hartley-Brewer, I'm very pleased to have you here. And I'm sure my guest who's been joining me throughout the show, editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater, is as well. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget, if you miss anything of the show, you can go to my YouTube page. It's called The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. You really have no excuses for not finding it on YouTube. Hit subscribe and then you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we are going to be talking about Nigel Farage's announcement this morning of his detain and deport policy of all illegal boat arrivals. Yep, you arrive here, you are out. Women and children also included. We're going to be talking about that. He announced that 10:30 this morning. He has challenged the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, on whether he wants to protect Britain's borders and citizens or remain wedded to outdated international treaties and judges' rulings. I think we all know the answer to that one. The government, meanwhile, has been touting their one in, one out policy, insisting today that now more than 100 asylum seekers have been detained, ready for deportation to France. However, 100 is a literal drop in the channel of the number of people who've actually arrived in the last few weeks. And we've had over 28,000 already so far this calendar year. But also they won't tell us exactly when they're going to be deported. And bearing in mind, they're going to be deported back to France. And then we're going to have some other people in return, plus all of their families as well. So I'm not entirely sure that he is getting to grips with the issue as he claims. Plus, we're going to be talking about another reform policy. And again, they are being looked at as the next government in waiting. Reform said they're going to lift the ban on fracking if they win power at the next election. Deputy Leader Richard Tice said it would be grossly financially negligent to leave hundreds of billions of pounds worth of energy buried underground. Another sensible reform policy. They are coming thick and fast, are they not? However, was this a sensible policy from Donald Trump? He signed an executive order yesterday seeking to punish people for burning the American flag with a year in prison. No ifs, no buts. This comes despite a US Supreme Court ruling some years ago that said that the desecration of the US flag was protected as part of their free speech rights. We'll be talking about that with the American correspondent and get to all of that coming up. Say, Tom Slater, I mean, just in terms of the push from Labour today that but we've detained 100 people out of the 28,000 who've arrived so far. 49% increase in the number of people who've arrived in the first year of Keir Starmer's premiership as opposed to the year before. And we are going to deport, 100 people, hopefully, soon-ish, and in return we're going to get another 100 back. I mean, that is a laughable policy. Even if you expanded that to every single person who came in was deported and then you got someone else back, that is still a laughable policy compared to the, no ifs, no buts we're hearing from Reform today.
I mean, it's embarrassing, isn't it? It's an insult to everyone's intelligence. We all know that asylum claims in total are up. We know that even hotel numbers are up, despite the fact that they're really supposedly laser focused on closing them. Yeah. We know that this government claimed that it was smashing the gangs. It was actually smashing all kinds of records for small boats arrivals and the rest. Deportations are up, but again, if you look at it in the broader context, they're not making a wonderful go of it, are they? And also no one trusts them to. I think Labour are at best going to, at the end of this Parliament, have been able to kind of tinker around the edges of migration, both legal and illegal. They will have some superficial wins to demonstrate, but that's not good enough. This is a bit like the last Tory government. There would be certain things that they could point to. We've reduced small boats crossings in this area, we've signed this deal with Albania, which has brought the numbers down, what have you. But it's not going to be seen as good enough if there's not clearly a plan to deal with this issue at source, to properly control the border. That's what Reform, at least in theory, are offering here. There's obviously no alternative.
But at least there people will trust that Reform, actually genuinely want to do it, even if there may be an awful lot of humps along the way. Well, I want to hear from you. What do you make of what Nigel Farage had to announce today? The plan to detain and mass deport illegal migrants, also replacing the Human Rights Act with the British Bill of Rights. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. Text the word message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV, and of course don't forget that calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message, and we'll get to all those coming up very soon. First up though, delighted to welcome the independent peer, former Labour MP Baroness Kate Hoey to the show. Very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Well, I'm wondering if are you one of the former Labour grandees, the likes of the David Blunketts and others, who've been criticising the Labour government, saying you've not been getting to grips with this issue and you're going to have to do more to take on the threat, and the polls suggest it is a very real and present danger to Labour's chances in the next election, of Nigel Farage's Reform Party?
Yes, I listened to most of the Nigel Farage press conference this morning, and it was very wide-ranging because he didn't just deal with immigration, but dealing with the general issue of, the country's law and order, and the fact that, the probation service isn't working, magistrates' courts not working, petty crime isn't covered, and all of these things. And I think that was quite clever to link the whole things together before he went on to the real issue of illegal migration. Labour obviously will be worried about this. We've already seen that it's affecting some of their policies. They've changed slightly. But of course, nobody trusts them. Nobody believes them. And no one believes the Conservatives either. And I think what Farage said today was very interesting because he said, I know basically parties aren't trustworthy, but people do say this is our last shot. This is our last chance of getting a government that might seriously look at this issue and do something.
And at least be genuinely motivated to do it. This is something Nigel Farage has been campaigning on for many years. And we used to have, it was arrivals on the backs of lorries. People, we had the Calais jungle, didn't we? And we had people, jumping into backs of lorries and camper vans, getting on trains and they managed to clamp down on that. People are still coming in that route, but the focus is very much on the boats. The boats were a new phenomenon when that was shut down. It is very likely that if you shut down the boats, people will appear, somehow get to our country another way. But the key thing is wanting them to not come to our country. And this is something that, French politicians have been talking about, the El Dorado, that we offer the welfare, the hotel, the black market working. The odds are you'll never be deported and you can bring your family over. And basically, whatever your life in France, whatever your life back in your country you've come from, it's going to be better. We need to, if the message is very clear, if you come here and you've not come here legally, you've got no right to stay, you ain't staying. And for the period of time you're here, you're in a detention camp, not working, you ain't going to bring your family, which is all what Reform is announcing, then that will send a message. That will surely stop anyone arriving illegally, shouldn't it? Or on the grand scale of things.
I think the truth is that all over the world there is a feeling, I'm sure, that the United Kingdom is a soft touch when it comes to migrants generally. And of course, what he also talked about today, which was very important, was the overstayers. They actually are a very high proportion of people who are here illegally, the students who come in and stay on.
Oh, I mean, we're talking well over 1 million people.
Exactly.
That's far in excess of the illegal migrants.
And he was including all those people as well in the fact that they must realise that from now on, or when and if there is a Reform government, that will change. They will not be allowed to do that. So I think that just listening to it this morning, I was just putting myself in being an ordinary person watching it, who's feeling concerned and worried. And I think they would be, I think it will send a real message that Reform means business. Now, whether it helps them in the polls, I would be surprised if it didn't.
Yeah, well, it's interesting is you've got the Rupert Lowe, the former Reform UK MP, he's talked about mass deportations, and they were always getting into a bit of a row with Nigel Farage, and lots of people on the sort of further right accusing him of being too soft on this issue. This seems very clear-cut. I mean, there's nothing in here I don't like, apart from Zia Youssef mentioned making it an offence punishable by up to 5 years in prison to tear up your identity documents. I mean, no one will know whether you've torn them up or lost them at sea, so I'm not quite sure how that works. But in terms of dealing with the backlog, I mean, the reality of this is similar in terms of like the Australian policy. If we can't send you back to your own country, then you're going to head off to the Ascension Islands in the middle of the Atlantic, or Albania or Rwanda or wherever. But we're going to be out of the, scrapping the Human Rights Act, getting out of the European Convention on Human Rights, derogating to the Refugee Convention. So you're not going to be able to use any of that. End of, nothing to discuss. If it's a manifesto commitment, the House of Lords can't block it. I've got no doubt at all that Nigel Farage isn't worried about people liking him at North London dinner parties, so he doesn't mind upsetting the civil service, who frankly can go on strike and then we can all get more sodding done, frankly, with them on strike. So I can see that they could actually do this. But in terms of the backlog, you can stop people coming in, because as soon as people go, oh, hold on a minute, my mate who went over last week, he's now being detained in a camp, it's not very pleasant, and he's going to be deported. There's no point me paying 1,500 quid to get on a boat to come over to. There is an element where you can't tackle the backlog because you've got to find these people. And I've got a funny feeling that the day you say, right, we're coming for these people, the day after Reform is elected, those people just disappear from their asylum hotels, disappear from the homes we've been paying for them, and they just gone like a puff of smoke, and they will still be here and not deported.
Yes, there is, of course, the caveat that Reform have put in about the idea that if someone volunteers to go back in a certain period of time, a very short period of time, but if they know that if they can go back then to their own country and be given, a contribution,
£2.5 grand
money, which is not, not.
But it will be a lot cheaper than the cost of us doing it forcefully. So there is an argument.
And that would also be an incentive. I think a lot of this is about incentivizing and showing people that the easy touch situation that is over. And of course the other aspect that he was very keen to push was the idea that we could get deals with other countries because we have a Foreign Office aid program that actually puts a lot of money into some of these countries, and if they don't take people back, then we can either stop that or we can stop visas coming from the countries. But it's all about will. It's all about political will, and that's where I think Reform are really going to have to prove and show that they mean it. But then Nigel Farage has a bit of a record of pointing out things that actually in the end have been proved to be right.
Yeah, I mean, lots of people have been talking. I mean, Tom Slater mentioned a bit earlier, the Overton window. This is this idea of like what it's sort of okay to discuss in the public sphere, the opinions that are acceptable. So you could, you can have. Oh, I'm very worried about illegal migration, but you can't be worried about legal migration. Or it shifts and shifts. The Overton window has lurched. I mean, it's lurched massively in terms of the. But I don't think it's what's changed with the British people. I think it's the political classes, the media classes, catching up with where the British people have been for quite a long time. I mean, British people since 2010 have been voting for mass uncontrolled immigration to be put to an end. They've been voted for tens of thousands for Cameron in 2010, 2015 again, 2017, 2019. They vote for it again and again. 2016 referendum. Doesn't matter. The political classes have ignored it.
Nobody has been listening politically at the establishment level, and that's again something that has been, picked up by Reform and used very cleverly. But they can be clever, but as long as they mean it, and that is a thing that I think Nigel was very keen to point out how he had opposed way back when he was in the European Parliament, the European Union plans to open up their borders, really, and that was not part of the reason why Brexit was so important. The reality was then, of course, the leaders didn't carry it through. Yeah. So, he has been proved to be right on so many things, but the public is there with him. And the whole debate has changed over the last few months, and it will continue to change. And of course, what I presume will happen now that both Conservatives and Labour will have to adjust their policies to kind of...
Well, you mentioned that. The Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, she has posted on social media saying Farage's immigration plan looks very familiar. We set out our deportation bill months ago. He's copied our homework but missed the lesson. At party conference coming up, he said, we'll show you not just the answers but our working. That's how we'll build trust with the public and get real results. Now, I'm not sure, Kemi Badenoch, that is going to fly. No one minds if someone's copied someone's homework, but at the end of the day, you were in government. OK, she wasn't the Home Secretary, she wasn't Prime Minister, but a lot of people will simply say, Tories, Labour started all this, Tories have been in government, and Tories talk the talk, but they didn't walk the walk, and they didn't deliver on this. That sort of criticism isn't going to work, and likewise, I would say Labour's criticism today from the poor minister out doing the rounds, talking about how the £10 billion cost that the Reform Party have put on this policy, saying, oh, no, it'll cost way more than that. I mean, I don't think this is a spreadsheet issue for an awful lot of voters.
I agree. I think that the details of the cost, I'm sure, have been fairly well worked out, but they need to be scrutinised. But the reality is it doesn't really matter, because I think the figures that show of how much it's costing at the moment for illegal migrants are very much understated, because it doesn't take into account all the extras that they get and all of the extra burden on the National Health Service and in schools.
And the extra cost to local people of housing because it's not available.
Yeah.
I mean, every single, the criminality, the policing, there are so many extra costs, and the impact on local communities, on our culture as well.
Oh, well, that's what people seeing in their own areas change that they've not been asked about, change that they haven't given any consent to, and they're seeing things that are, and that's again been picked up very, very well by Reform, and the other two parties are lagging behind. And the Conservatives, I mean, they can say what they like about what's in these plans that were theirs, but they didn't do it. And they didn't even talk the good talk.
No.
So I think it's been. I would say that this will be a day when both Labour and Conservatives are really sitting, thinking we are going to have to do something very radical to get back on.
But certainly for Labour, it's going to go sort of against everything in their bones and in the Prime Minister's bones. And I just simply don't believe they are going to be willing to do it. What they want to do is make it all go away. They're going to, we'll get rid of the backlog by basically giving people leave to remain. We're going to get people into homes, or even, we're still going to be paying for their housing benefit, for goodness sake. They just want to get it off the headlines. They don't want to solve the actual underlying problem. I think that is the issue. One of the things, though, if Reform were able to do this, if they did win, again, they have to win power, they have to do a lot of this. A lot of this will take time. They need to have a very strong majority to be able to do this. They're still going to face issues in the House of Lords. Now, you are a peer in the House of Lords. I don't really approve of peerages. I don't really approve of the House of Lords. I'm for democratic accountability. But if we're going to have it, I'm very happy that you and a number of the regulars we have on our show are in there. But it's very interesting that the government is looking at basically sacking or forcing to resign the peers who fail to turn up and participate in the House of Lords. They reckon they can get rid of 200 almost immediately by getting rid of people who, for instance, are over 80 and people who never turn up. Do you think that will be a good thing?
Well, I think that there is a feeling in the country, certainly the House of Lords is too big. But the reality is, of course, there are over 800 officially members. But the reality is, in terms of voting and when people are there, there's never more than about 600 taking part in
still
votes.
A lot. It's almost as many MPs as we've got.
It's still a lot of people. But I think it's very important if there are going to be changes. I mean, they're already throwing out some very, very good peers in getting rid of hereditary peers rather than doing what could have been done when a hereditary peer died. You didn't replace them, as happens at the moment. That would have gradually got rid of them. So that's getting rid of a number. And I think it needs to be done in a way that's not just being party political.
Yeah.
They want to get it down so there's a majority, because the House of Lords can't stop legislation unless it's, if it's been in the manifesto.
Yeah.
But they do tend to pick up an awful lot of nonsense that the House of Commons lets through without any scrutiny.
Yeah, and the key thing is having experts or people who've served as ministers. I can understand, but I know a number of people, frankly, who I was at uni with, who were just sort of well-heeled, or they used to go and get Boris Johnson's tea, and those people are peers. I think that's an embarrassment.
Yeah,
there's some girl, she's some junior assistant. No one can work out for the life of themselves how she became a peer. But she's in there. I mean, people in their 20s, the idea that these people have anything to offer us is a laughable idea.
Yeah, I think the whole way it's done is probably needing to be scrutinised, but I don't think that will actually happen, because prime ministers do like to have the ultimate power to be able to put people in, and those of us who've gone in know that. But I think what is important is that it continues to be as independent as possible and scrutinises properly, and that we actually see people there who want to work and be there, and not just there for the title.
Absolutely. Baroness Kate Herriot, thank you for joining us, independent peer, former Labour MP. Thomas Hayter, just on the issue of the House of Lords, and it came up earlier, didn't it, that House of Lords could try, could try and stop anything that Reform wanted to do. I think the civil service would be working full-time trying to do that. But the House of Lords, it's a manifesto commitment. They are, again, by constitutional convention, they are banned from doing it. But again, you think like the Brexit referendum, they worked very hard along with the Commons to try and the Speaker of the Commons then, our dear, wonderful, long-lost friend, the former Speaker. But they have a way of bending these conventions. Do you think that we should abolish the House of Lords? Do you think we should reform the House of Lords? What do you think?
Oh no, absolutely. I think we should get rid of it, turn it into an absolutely wonderful museum that people can go and visit.
Party venue, a great party venue.
Be the best Wetherspoons in the country, I think, if it was properly kitted out. But
beautiful carpet. They love their carpet.
And a totally unique one, which is obviously a prerequisite for a spoons. But I think it's well past the point that this is necessary. I think that it warps democratic process, even though you do have the convention that if something's in the manifesto that means you can't interfere, even the kind of game of ping pong, as it's often referred to as, is a way of influencing policy in a way that I don't think a
wearing governments down.
Exactly, elected chamber should. And if there are problems with scrutiny in terms of the elected chamber, then that should be addressed. We should have a higher calibre of MPs. We should have better scrutiny.
Bring in the experts at an earlier stage.
Exactly.
I think they should be involved when they draft the law. That would be a good idea.
No, but I suppose the sort of near-term problem for reform, if they are coming in, is that you'd be walking into a parliament in which one of the houses is dominated by your opponents. And so that would naturally be something which is going to make things quite difficult, whether you would be...
Unless Nigel Farage then, again, that's lots of prime ministers do. They just literally, just nominate 50 peers. But again, we do just have this issue in terms of getting anything done, even if the politicians have their will. And in this case, I've got no doubt at all that Reform, Nigel Farage and Richard Tyson, all the others, absolutely have the will. They've taken enough flack for it over the years, again, going against the polite thought on these issues, to represent British people on this issue, that they are going to be up against the House of Lords delaying everything. They're up against the lawyers, and again, even trying to change the law. It's amazing how people go, no, but there's a Human Rights Act, as if there's this bizarre idea on the left, as if every law and every convention, anything, any treaty that has been signed before now is somehow sort of like on the tablet of stone brought down, from the mountain, as opposed to we have elections, so we can elect people to make new laws or undo old laws, which I think we like a lot of that, to actually represent the people now. The idea that laws are set in stone, what's the point? Well, we should never bother having an election again then.
Like forever and all time. And that's one of the big problems, I think, where the House of Lords is concerned. There's a hell of a lot of lawyers in there, which can tell you a lot about how allergic often that section of society is to democratic norms. There's this kind of idea that even certain things which are just, things that have been passed into law 10 minutes ago are treated as if they have kind of ironclad constitutional importance, just because it happens to align with the political views of the person who we're talking about. So it needs to be looked at, absolutely. And I think Reform will be forced to look at the question of the laws in one way, shape or form if they do.
I mean, one thing I never allow the show is people say, it is outrageous, that Labour don't have a mandate, they only got 34% of the vote. No. Under our system of government, under our system of elections, Labour have a mandate to do stuff. They have every right to do stuff. We have the right to criticise them. We should always maintain that. But any government that gets elected, they have a right to do stuff. If they've got that mandate from the British people, it was in their manifesto, they said they were going to do it. I'm sorry, then that's the deal. And then we have a right to vote them out if we don't like it. That's how it's supposed to work. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but I particularly want to hear your thoughts on what Nigel Farage had to say. This detention and deportation en masse of illegal migrants. But how is he going to tackle the backlog? Because might well stop more coming and the people who come over in a short period of time. But won't the rest of them kind of just disappear? Do you think, though, that where there's a will, there is a way? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
Immigration has always been one of the sort of big three subjects where you compare it to the cost of living crisis and the NHS, but it just seems to be ratcheting up even higher. Now, it's all very well and good having smaller policies and saying there's no silver bullet. It's going to take a whole plethora of policies to actually get on top of dealing with illegal migration.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:27 is the time. Let's get your messages and your calls coming in about what Nigel Farage had to announce about reforms plans for the detention and mass deportation of illegal migrants. Lee says, brilliant by Nigel and Zia Youssef also there. Clear and eloquent, no waffle like you get from Starmer and the rest, outlined perfectly. And let's point out again, women and children also included in these plans. Very simple. If you're here illegally, you're gone. Rob says the biggest elephant in the room will be the civil service and the MOD. Will they actually do anything or just strike and down tools in protest? I have a funny feeling the RAF would be quite happy to fly these people out. I mean, if you can charter airlines, you'll find an airline that'll do it. Jane says, yes, please, the Reform Party form the next government, they will need to sort out the blob with great urgency. I think that is one of the #1 issues. It's one of the things I really admired Michael Gove for. Michael Gove and I have had big differences on lockdown. We've taken each other to task on this. But in terms of trying to deal with the education blob, people who basically low standards for poor kids, basically, was what it was. He'd be the man to do that. Dave says, a collection of already failed plans from no ideas, Nigel, empty rhetoric to make noise. I mean, it wasn't empty rhetoric, was it? Answers none of the questions of how it will be implemented and even where so-called camps would be. Does he not expect local opposition? Well, you can declare a national emergency, which I think would be fair, and then, I mean, to be fair, the government owns a hell of a lot of land. Does he expect the world to bow to him? No, but I think he expects the country's organisations to bow to the British people if they vote for him. Does he think a two-tier Bill of Rights is not totally hypocritical? Now, this is the idea that Bill of Rights, Tom, would give greater rights to British people than foreign nationals. I mean, yeah.
That already exists.
Duh.
I mean, you only have rights because they're enshrined in a nation's constitution, written or
I
unwritten.
commit a crime, I can't be deported because I'm a British citizen.
In the same way that if you went over to another country, you would not have the same rights because you're not a citizen. You know, rights are conferred by dint of citizenship.
Like
or your
voting,
legal status.
you've already got, If you're not a citizen, you don't get to vote. Oh, it's really unfair, it's two-tier justice. I mean, I'll do one, Dave. Right, let's go to the phone line. So Richard is in Oxford. I'm sure a bastion of strong concern about migration. Richard, what do you want to say?
Yes, I am.
Are you a lone voice of sanity?
Well, just correcting opinions about Ascension Island. During the 80s, I landed a 747 there. We were doing an RAF resupply thing from the Falkland Islands.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful island. I spent about 4 nights there, and I'd pay to go and have a holiday.
Oh, really? I mean, I did look it up. I mean, let's face it, we're all going, where like we did with Chagos. Where is it? Right, slap bang in the Atlantic, long way west of Africa. But it looked absolutely stunning. But I'm wondering whether the people who are resident there now will be happy about having all these people arrive. But I mean,
well, no. But if you really, in my opinion, Mr. Farage has got it slightly wrong. If this would be a temporary stop to the boats, but if he did, I mean, it's got a huge big runway. It was there in case the shuttle missed on its approach to Miami, and it could then land on Ascension. It's about a 3,000-metre runway, which is about the same as Heathrow's. It's a very easy place to land.
Right.
It's also got oil supply tankers that bring fuel in for it, and it would be really quite easy if you scooped up everybody who landed on the beach, put them in a bus, took them to a military airport. I say military. I think you might declare some kind of mild state of emergency to overcome the legal bits. And I think if you flew people down there, you could set up a beautiful tented camp. The climate is super. It's sort of temperate, tropical.
There we are then.
I really loved my time there. I watched turtles giving birth to babies, digging out their nests on a beach.
I mean, It sounds better than a lot of the places that people have been housed here. Fascinating. Thank you. I mean, what a great call, Richard. Thank you very much indeed. Actually, just it probably might sound better than Epping in Essex. Just say the owners of the Bell Hotel in Epping in Essex, of course, one of the first sets of protests we've had about the migrants being held there. Samani Hotels Limited, who own the Bell Hotel in Epping, they're going to have their bid to appeal against a ruling that they cannot house asylum seekers at the site heard by the Court of Appeal this Thursday, according to court listings. We know that the government is challenging the court. Basically, as we know, local councils have basically been saying, including Epic Council in Essex, basically saying, look, you didn't have a right to turn this hotel into basically a house of multiple occupants, a hostel for migrants, and so it's going to be closed down. The government is challenging that, but also the hotel company itself is going to challenge that, and they've got a hearing at the Court of Appeal on Thursday. Right, now let's go back to one more call on this. Greg is in Edinburgh, wants to have his say on what Nigel Farage had to announce today. Good afternoon to you, Greg.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon to you. And just a quick thing to say how great it is to hear from the wonderful Kate Hoey.
She's just always saying.
She's a marvel. No, there are two things I'd quickly like to mention. First thing is they need to highlight the fact that the government are trying to con us all, yet again. Yeah. It's a virtual amnesty when it comes to the asylum process, and that needs to be really highlighted. The levels of granting in an effort to con us into believing that they're actually, clearing out the backlog, they're simply, it's appalling. The levels of granting asylum status are by far greater than any other country in Europe and in the EU, who are all supposedly, adhering to the ECHR. So why are they having levels much lower than ours? It's just a con by the government.
Indeed, apparently. I mean, the EU's has accepted around 7% of applications, and we receive 3 times as many in via that scheme as leaving. But I mean, also, it's just extraordinary. Half of those in refugee camps in France trying to get to the UK have been already rejected for asylum by an EU member state already. That tells you everything.
Yeah, I mean, that's just nonsense. But another thing I wanted to say was, again, we really need to get almost draconian in the application of the law that exists.
Yeah.
This idea that chucking your passport in the channel is going to be a criminal offence.
Yeah.
That, I'm sorry to say, it's just silly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm annoyed at them for that. You couldn't prove that.
It's just silly. Where they need to do it is that Baroness Hoey mentioned was the pull factor. You really need to hammer the people. If these people disappear into the ether when they're here, they still have to live, they still have to eat, and they're working somewhere. Yeah. And what should happen is, if someone's employing them, then really, really hammer the employee.
Yeah, and you know what we don't need is identity cards because of this. I mean, it's a load of absolute nonsense. The onus is on the employer to establish beyond any doubt whatsoever that the person they're employing is legally allowed to work. And we need to make those fines absolutely astronomically huge, and possibly, I think, a prison sentence as well if you knowingly do that. That we can solve. None of these issues are impossible to solve. You can solve anything as long as you actually enforce the law. Our main issue in this country, we don't enforce the law.
I would go further. Well, prison and fines are one thing, but if you see, I mean, so many of these jobs are in the economy, working in restaurants or nail bars or whatever. All these things need to be licensed by local authorities.
Yep.
If you are found to be employing someone illegally, you lose your license.
End of. Yeah, it's really, really simple. People wouldn't take the risk. And it's like landlords. When I worked as a pub barmaid, the landlord would go, do not serve that person over there, they're likely underage, before everyone had ID. He said, no, I'll lose my licence. Genuine fear that you're going to lose your licence. You don't do it. It's as simple as that. Greg, lots of sense. Thank you very much, as always. 12:36 is the time. Up next, going to talk about, ironically, another reform policy, frack. Baby frack, but also this is also about the trying to get billions of pounds worth of energy buried underground. Fracking to win power. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:37 is the time. Tom Slater is still with me. Frack, baby, frack. We've got another reform policy has been announced in the last 24 hours. Not just this plan to detain and mass deport illegal migrants, but also Deputy Leader Richard Dyson, something he's been talking about for years, said it would be grossly financially negligent to leave hundreds of billions of pounds worth of energy buried underground. And they've already told oil and gas firms prepare to make fresh applications for licences and get ready to drill, baby, drill. That's even 4 years before the next general election comes. So would you support that?
Absolutely. I think the way in which that we've basically tied our hands behind our backs when it comes to our shale gas and oil reserves has been insane. It's on the basis of, absurd kind of limits on drilling and the potential tremors that it produces. A lot of propaganda from the Green lobby that this is really dangerous and disruptive.
Not outright lies.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's been so categorically debunked, a lot of this stuff, and yet still it continues on. Obviously, there's been a lot of lawfare regionally to try and stop exploration from happening. But, if you look at the US, the way in which they've been able to exploit those resources to tremendous gain for those places has been really clear. It's also, incidentally, a big part of how, during the Obama years in particular, they brought down their greenhouse gas emissions, funnily enough, because of the fact that obviously this is, in terms of some of the alternatives, is less
Fracking
carbon
is quite
intensive.
Clean, yeah.
So it's
even while they talked the game.
Yeah.
Oh,
exactly.
Yeah.
This is terrible.
Yes, 99.9% of scientists say global warming is an absolute human-made disaster. Oh, but meanwhile, we're going to be
baby drills.
Indeed.
So I think it's a good thing, and I think it will probably take a bit of work to bring the public on side, because I think this issue hasn't really been a live one, and you need to win people over.
Yes, I think fracking is a word apparently we should use because people have associated that with this propaganda. Well, let's talk about this with Rupert Darwell. He's the author of Green Tyranny and joins us now. A very good afternoon to you, Rupert.
Glad to be joining you, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Well, indeed. I mean, I would say green tyranny is exactly what this is. We've got a load of, shale gas underneath our ground, particularly in certain parts of the country. It's been identified, and we're just leaving it there. Indeed, companies being told to cement up wells where they found it, and we're leaving a load of North Sea oil and gas under the waves as well because of the green tyranny.
Yeah, and it's a bipartisan or three-party green tyranny, because it was Ed Davey who imposed these ridiculous limits on the tremors that frackers could make, far below that for construction sites or any other.
And we're talking about the equivalent of a double-decker bus going by.
I mean, ridiculously. He's actually admitted it. He designed the limits to stop fracking. We then had Boris Johnson, who imposed a fracking moratorium.
Carrie Johnson did it really, but her representative on Earth carried it out.
Liz Truss tried to lift it. Her government didn't last long, and as soon as she went, Rishi Sunak reimposed it. Yeah. And then, of course, the other thing that Tom mentions, oil and gas, the North Sea oil and gas, and we had Jeremy Hunt, when he was Chancellor, impose the windfall tax, which then his Labour successor made even worse. So this is very much a three-party complete mess that they've created of Britain's energy resources.
And in that bizarre situation where a lot of people, the Ed Miliband's now and Keir Starmer and others, and all the Labour MPs, in fact, a load of Tories as well, they'll all claim, but we're going to move to net zero. Okay, at no point, at any point before or after 2050 are we going to have net zero use of oil and gas. We need oil and gas, and it makes a lot more sense for us to be producing our own, even if you were opposed to you're worried about the concerns of climate change and believe it's man-made and a massive issue. It still makes more sense for us to have it use gas and oil from under our ground or under the waves in our seas than it does to ship it from the other side of the world, because that is not only what we are doing, it's what we're going to continue to do long after, even if net zero was achieved.
Well, that's absolutely right. The other aspect of this is that oil and gas create revenues for the government, whereas wind and solar have to be subsidised. So there's this whole angle of the impact on public finances, on taxation and so forth. And yes, I think frackers do, one of the smart things to do is to work out how you compensate local people from the disruption, which is not from earth tremors, it's actually from lorries, essentially lorries moving sand and so forth to help the fracking process. But local people, local households need to be compensated for that, and they can get and gain some of the benefit from the activity that's happening in their localities.
And I feel the same way, exactly. Same for airports, same for new housing developments and the like. You've only put a load of pylons up or whatever it is. Compensating local people, the people who have to put up with the disruption. If you have a nuclear power station or a gas power station put near you, I'm really happy for those people to get, cheaper in perpetuity, cheaper energy or whatever to compensate them for the for the loss of amenity. That seems really, really basic and cheaper at half the price. But do you think that realistically the reform could ever actually do this? Because you would, again, you'd have the local councils and the planning. You'd have every green organisation funded to the tune of billions by other international organisations and the billionaires who've decided this is their big virtue signal. That actually you'd never be able to actually get this off the ground given the current legal framework.
Get
this out of the ground even.
there are two obstacles. One is the politics, and the first thing is to remind people that oil and gas jobs are very high-paying jobs, which is why some of the best-paid people in the country happen to live in Aberdeen. The other one, as you point out, is the legal frameworks. You have to amend the Town and Country Planning Act so that local authorities are precluded from considering greenhouse gas emissions in their environmental impact. You need to change the national planning policy planning framework to do the same thing. So there's some hard work, there's some basic.
But we need to do that anyway because a lot of that legislation actually prevents you doing anything. You can't build anything given those rules.
You can't end up with a situation where a judge says that a coal mine, a new coal mine or an oil field can't be developed because it raises greenhouse gas emissions, which has an effect on climate change. You just can't have that. I mean, no other same country does that. Norway, which is has a huge proportion of EVs, is still it's a massive oil and gas producer, and they're not going to leave their national wealth underground.
No, but haven't they just discovered an amazing new seam of oil and gas in the North Sea at a point where we basically said we're not going to bother because we're not going to be able to get it out because of the restrictions because of net zero. I mean, this is madness.
Norway has a left-of-centre government, and there's a basic policy that British government should do is if Norway is doing it, we should do it, because Norway's done extremely well out of North Sea oil and gas.
And they didn't fritter it all away as well in the 80s. They went into their sovereign wealth fund. 4% of the world's wealth or something is investments is by Norway, and they only allowed to spend a certain amount, and it's only on capital spending. I mean, we should think about this sort of long-term planning in this country. That might make us a little bit better. But you think they could really do this? Because we know the one thing that Reform have already announced in recent months is telling a lot of these sort of, green subsidised organisations and firms, listen, you can bid for this particular thing now, but if we're in power in 4 years' time, you ain't getting a penny. So good luck with that. And that's going to dissuade a lot of companies from going along with a lot of the green madness if they're not sure that particular gravy train has got a long way to go.
I think Richard Tice has been absolutely brilliant on this in warning potential investors. Look at the underlying economics of what you're putting your money into, and if it relies on government subsidy, you should run a mile. And in contrast, it has to be said, the Conservatives are suffering from acute policy paralysis. They don't seem to be able to say anything on stuff like this.
No, indeed. Just find it, though, would it bring prices down? Because one of the things we've always told, even if we did do the fracking, I remember discussing this on this very show in this studio some years ago, it wouldn't actually bring our prices down, but it certainly has in America. Why would our prices not go down? Because if we were fracking for our own gas?
Well, there's a reason why because the natural gas market is regional, in that you have gas pipelines, which creates a regional market.
Right.
When you ship it, you have to turn it into LNG, and then you have to
liquefy
it at the other end. And so there is a point. But what can be said without any doubt is that if we did fracking, it would strengthen the national finances, it would create more higher paid jobs, and it would improve the national finances. It would probably strengthen the pound and make everyone better off simply through that.
There you are, you see.
There are economic benefits, even if prices don't actually fall.
We're all going to be winners. Rupert Dowell, author of Green Tyranny, thank you for that. 12:47 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking to New York Post columnist Adam Coleman about Donald Trump's executive order signed yesterday imposing a 1-year prison sentence on anyone who dares to burn the American flag. But I thought the Trump administration cared about freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Isn't the right to burn your own country's flag part of that? We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
What is that?
They were opened on the Conservatives' watch, you will remember, but it hasn't worked as a policy, and it has created these flashpoints. But I think it has to be done in a ordered way, and I think it needs to be done in sequence. And if you're going to do it over 4 years, it has to be done properly. And I know it looks bad. I know people are angry and saying, what the heck is going on when you're saying one thing, but it looks like you're doing something else. But it has to be done in a proper, organised way, because that's how governments have to work. But by the end of that 4 years...
They also have to abide by the rule of law.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning. Afternoon, sorry. Welcome back to the show. 12:50 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater still with me. I'll get his thoughts on what our next topic is in just a couple of moments. Don't forget, we'll welcome Ian Collins in. Tell us what's happening on his show in a few moments too. First up, though, let's talk about what Donald Trump has been up to, among other things, world peace and all of that. He's unveiled a 1 year's prison sentence, no ifs, no buts, for anyone who burns the American flag. He signed an executive order on Monday seeking that punishment. Despite a Supreme Court ruling back in 1989, which ruled that burning or desecrating the American flag was actually a protected form of free speech. Well, let's talk about this with Adam Coleman. He's a columnist at the New York Post. Good afternoon to you, Adam.
Thank you for having me back on.
Thank you for joining us. What has prompted this executive order from the president? Has there been a sudden spate of flag burning we haven't been aware of here?
Well, it's interesting. Trump 2.0, in many ways, is trying to do things that Trump 1.0 feels that it should have done. So Trump, in his first term, had to deal with the nationwide riots, things of that nature. He had to watch left-wing uprisings essentially happening around the country. And so now he's actually taking the bull by the horns and doing things to combat that, and things that he feels that he should actually fight against. Whether I agree with it is, as far as doing it now, are there more important things? Is a different story. But that's,
do you agree that? Do you think it should be a criminal offence to burn the American flag?
Well, I always thought that there's an asterisk, because there always has been. So, for example, you can burn your own flag, but where you do it actually matters. So if I do it in the middle of Fifth Avenue, I'd be violating New York City laws. I should be prosecuted. Yeah. So what he's advocating for, more so, I know he's blanket saying 1 year prison, right? But he's not a king. What he's telling local authorities to exercise laws that already exist. Yeah. He's telling them to actually enforce these things. So you can have as many laws as you want. It's the enforcement portion
And I
of
suppose
it.
there's an element, even in a public protest, someone sort of setting fire to something, a public protest, even if it's their own property, people, you know, might constitute some sort of issue. But it's fascinating to see this happening in America. And I don't agree with this at all. I think there's a large general rule shouldn't go around burning flags or Qurans or Bibles or anything like that. I think as a general rule you should be able to use your words to make your argument. But I would defend the right of anyone to do any of those things. But this at the same time, in Britain, people are fighting a sort of a war of attrition to put up the state flag of England, the national flag of England, you know, the St George's Cross, despite in local councils taking them down, despite the fact they're happily flying Palestinian flags officially on their lampposts, and British people, English people in particular, saying we're fed up that our flag doesn't get the same respect as a non-existent foreign country should have. I mean, it is interesting to see those completely different sides of the battle, but there's no doubt at all, flags are very important to people.
Yes, they're hugely symbolic, but we can look at examples of, I believe it's somewhere in Florida, there was an LGBT flag, a mural that was put on the road, and someone took their truck and did a burnouts on it, and they got prosecuted for it. So, you know,
I believe they've done it 2 or 3 times, haven't they?
Yeah, right. And doing burnouts in general doesn't get you locked up in jail for
so basically the rubber from the tire is damaging the mural. It's on a road, it's going to get damaged. I would shrug and say, nah.
Exactly, but that just tells you who's willing to enforce what, because at that particular moment, that symbol means a lot more than the American flag does. So, you know, for a lot of people...
Well, it shouldn't.
It shouldn't, right? But that was at the particular time, that's what they were willing to enforce.
The thing I find extraordinary, Donald Trump has said this, and he said it when he met with our Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Scotland last month, I think. J.D. Vance keeps going on about this need to sort of protect freedom of speech in this country. And my God, yes, I'd love us to have a First Amendment. And Reform leader Nigel Farage is talking about, you know, a First Amendment style, you know, Bill of Rights for us here in the UK. And I'd be massively in favour of that, a written constitution. But it's a bit rich for Donald Trump and his vice president to talk about how, you know, all these infringements on freedom of speech and freedom of expression here in the UK, and famously Lucy Connolly for our horrific tweet last year, having just been freed last week. But at the same time, wanting to put someone in prison for the expression of anger at their own country. So, for instance, you know, people who didn't want to be drafted to fight in the Vietnam War, that was when the flag burning became a big thing. It's a bit hypocritical for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance to want this and then criticise this country for our infringements on freedom of speech, isn't it?
Yeah, I can understand your assessment there, but there's 2 elements to this. One, he wants there to be a court challenge, because the reason why we accept that burning a flag is part of speech is because of that Supreme Court ruling. So he's actually encouraging a challenge against that, which there may be legal arguments.
And again, he's got a 5-4 majority of Conservatives on the Supreme Court, so he wants to just change the rules, basically.
Essentially. And maybe there are better arguments, just like for Roe v. Wade. A lot of people say Roe v. Wade shouldn't have been something that widespread made abortion legal. But the second part I think people should focus on is foreign actors. This is a way to have someone who is in our country legally through visa process to have them kicked out, which I 100% agree with. If you're in our country as a guest, you have no reason to be part of any sort of social uprising, social upheaval whatsoever, or even showing a display of disdain for our country. Then get out. If you came into my house,
I agree with him on that. I don't think you should go to
Yeah.
another country and then just disrespect people's national symbols. I think that's a fair. Should you be in prison for it? That's the question. Adam Coleman, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Columnist at the New York Post. Tom Slater, we're on this. So you're a free speech absolutist. You always make it very clear, and that's spiked. You know, you are. I don't think for a moment that burning a flag should be, certainly if you're burning your own flag. What do you think if I went to America and I burnt an American flag, should I be deported or?
I mean, even in America, they've traditionally extended pretty extensive free speech rights to people who were there on visas and green cards.
As long as you're there legally, yeah.
Exactly, and I think that's generally speaking the right balance. I mean, this is something that Trump has been talking about for a while. I think primarily because it's kind of signalling. It's about trying to, make this about patriotism and all the rest of it. I think even with the I don't have an in-depth knowledge of all of their views on this, but even with the Conservative majority, it would be surprising if we saw something like this overturned.
Because often the Conservative majority are in favour of freedom of speech as an absolute.
Certainly historically. So it's one of those things where who knows where this will go, but I think a lot of it is sort of about signalling as much as anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for joining us throughout the show. Delighted to say Ian Collins is here.
Hey,
very, very good afternoon.
You're going to the electric chair, Hartley-Brewer.
Can you imagine? But as a general rule, it's like when we talk about, Korans and Bibles and things. Can everyone stop burning and
don't get me wrong.
Use words.
It annoys me when people burn stuff like that because it just looks ridiculous. However,
that's it. Hang your England flag from the lamppost. Then.
I don't. Yeah,
that's illegal. Don't do it. Hang it from your own house. I don't know.
Can you just? All I would say to the people putting up flags is, can you just do a quick YouTube kind of tutorial on how to put a flag up?
Yeah.
Because there's one near me. It's blue tacked on to some kind of post or something.
They've got better blue tack than I've ever managed to buy.
The minute there's a gust of wind, that thing's going over the A21.
But it was fascinating. I was away last week in France. I'm watching that. We are the only country that's ashamed of our the authorities are ashamed of our flag.
It's a bit bizarre, isn't it?
No one. It's my flag. I'm English. It's my flag.
Yeah.
No shame. I mean, I think it's really bizarre.
And it's interesting hearing people, academics mount supposed intelligent arguments against it. And you think, really? It's a flag, man.
It is completely normal in America. I mean, I went to school in America. You had to salute the flag in the morning in primary school. But also, people routinely have flagpoles in their gardens and flags in their windows. People think, oh, you're a bit strange.